Court of Silver Flames. Book 5 by Sarah Janet Maas. Part 4. Ataraxia. Chapter 64. Someone had poured sand into her mouth and taken a hammer to her head. Was still pounding on it, apparently. Nesta pried her tongue from her teeth, swallowing a few times to work some moisture back into her mouth. Her aching head since hit her. Male, varied, and so many. Hard, cold ground lay beneath her bare legs, pine needles poking through the thin material of her nightgown. Chill, blood-icing wind carried all those male scents above a tide of snow and pine and dirt. Nesta's eyes flew open. A broad male back filled her vision, most of it obscured by a pair of wings. Bound wings. Images of last night pelted her. The males who'd grabbed her, how she'd fought until they'd pushed something against her face that had her blacking out. Hearing Gwyn and Emery screaming, Nesta jolted upright. The view was worse than she'd expected. Far, far worse. Slowly, silently, she twisted in place. Unconscious Illyrian warriors were strewn around her. At her back, at her head, at her bare feet. More surrounded her, at least 200, stretching between the towering pines. The Blood Rite. She must have awoken before the others because she was made different. Nesta reached inward, toward that place where the ancient, awful power rested, and found nothing. As if the well had been drained, as if the sea had receded. The Blood Rite's spells bound magic. Her powers had been rendered useless. She knew her shaking wasn't entirely from the cold. Whatever time she had wouldn't last long. The others would soon stir, and find her standing among them in nothing but a nightgown, without weapons. She had to move, had to find Emery and Gwyn in this endless sprawl of bodies, unless they had been dumped elsewhere. Cassian, Rhysand, and Azriel had all been left in different places. She remembered. They'd spent days killing their way to each other amid the bloodthirsty warriors and beasts who roamed these lands. But they had somehow found each other and scaled Ramiel, the sacred mountain, and won the right. She'd be lucky to clear this general area. Her breath catching, Nesta eased to her feet, away from the shield of the warriors' bodies. The cold slammed into her, nearly robbing her of breath. Her shaking deepened. She needed something warmer, needed shoes, needed to make a weapon. Nesta peered at the watery sun, as if it'd tell her what direction to go to find her friends. But the light seared her eyes, worsening the pounding in her head. Trees. She could find the mossy side of the trees, Cassian had said. North would lie that way. The nearest tree rose about 20 feet and 10 bodies away. From what she could see, no moss grew anywhere on it. So she'd find higher ground and survey the land. See where Ramiel loomed and if she could spot the other dumping grounds. But she needed clothes and weapons and food and to find Gwyn and Emery and oh gods. Nesta pressed a hand over her mouth to keep her trembling exhale to near silence. Move. She had to move. But someone already had. The rustle of his wings gave him away. Nesta whirled. 100 feet off, separated from her by the sea of sleeping bodies, stood a beast of a male. She didn't know him, but she recognized that gleam in his eye, the predatory intent and cruel amusement. Knew what it meant when his stare dipped to her nightgown. Her breasts peaked against the frigid cold, her bare legs. Fear burned like acid through her entire body. None of the others stirred. At least she had that. But this male. He glanced to his left, just for a blink. Nesta followed his stare, and her breath caught. Embedded in the trunk of a tree, gleaming faintly, was a knife. Impossible. Having weapons in the Blood Rite went against its rules. Had the male known it would be there, or had he just spied it before she had? It didn't matter. It only mattered that the knife existed, and it was the sole weapon in sight. She could run, let him lunge at the knife and flee in the opposite direction and pray he didn't follow. Or she could go for the blade, beat him to it, and then... She didn't know what she'd do then, but she stood in a field of sleeping warriors who would all soon awaken, and if they found her weaponless, defenseless, Nesta ran. Cassian couldn't breathe. Hadn't been able to breathe or speak for long minutes now. His family had arrived, and they all surrounded him in the wrecked bedroom of Emery's house. They were speaking, Azriel with some urgency, but Cassian didn't hear him, heard nothing but the roaring in his head before he said to no one in particular, "I'm going after them." Silence fell, and he turned to find them all staring at him, pale and wide-eyed. Cassian tapped the siphons on the backs of his hands, and his remaining siphons appeared at his shoulders, knees, and chest. He nodded to Rhys. "Winnow me to her. Azee, you find Emery and Gwyn." Rhys didn't move an inch. "You know the laws, Cass." "Fuck the laws." "What laws?" Feyre demanded. "Tell her." Rhys ordered him, night swirling around his wings. Cassian bristled. "Tell her, Cassian." The asshole had used that inherent dominance on him. Cassian gritted out, "Anyone who pulls a warrior from the Blood Rite will be hunted down and executed, along with the warrior who is dishonorably removed from the rite." Feyre rubbed at her face. "So Nesta, Emery, and Gwyn have to stay in the rite. Even I can't break those rules," Rhys said, a shade softer. "No matter how much I might want to," he added, clasping Cassian's shoulder. Cassian's stomach turned over. Nesta and her friends, his friends, were in the rite, and he could do nothing to interfere, not without damning them all. His hands shook. "So, what, we just sit on our asses for a week and wait?" The idea was abhorrent. Feyre gripped his trembling fingers, squeezing tight. "Did you? Cassian, weren't you listening at all when we got here?" No, he'd barely heard anything. Azriel said tightly, "My spies got word that Eris has been captured by Brylin. She sent his remaining soldiers after him while he was out hunting with his hounds. They grabbed him and somehow, they were all winnowed back to her palace. I'm guessing using Kashiai's power. I don't care." Cassian aimed for the doorway. Even if, hadn't he been the one to tell Rhys not to go after those soldiers? To leave them be? He was a fool. He'd left an armed enemy in his blind spot and forgotten about it. But Eris could rot for all he cared. Azee said, "We have to get him out." Cassian drew up short. "We?" Rhys stepped up next to Azriel, Feyre beside him. A formidable wall. "We can't go," Feyre said, nodding to Rhys. It needed no explanation. With the babe less than 2 months away, Feyre wasn't risking anything. But Rhys, Cassian challenged his High Lord, "You can be in and out in an hour." "I can't go." Midnight storms swirled in Rhys's eyes. "Yes, you fucking can," Cassian said, rage rising like a tidal wave that would sweep away all in its path. "You." "I can't." It was agony. Pure, undiluted agony that filled Rhys's face. And fear. Feyre slipped her tattooed fingers through Rhys's. Amren asked sharply, "Why?" Rhys stared at the tattoo on Feyre's fingers, interlaced with his. His throat bobbed. Feyre answered for him. "We made a bargain. After the war, to only leave this world together." Amren began massaging her temples, muttering a prayer for sanity. Azriel asked. You made a bargain to die together? Fools, Amren hissed. Romantic, idealistic fools. Rhys turned bleak eyes to her. Cassian couldn't get a breath down. Az stood still as a statue. If Rhys dies, Feyre said thickly, fear bright in her own eyes. I die. Her fingers grazed her swollen belly. The babe would die too. And if you die, Feyre, Azriel said softly, then Rhys dies. The words rang hollow and cold like a death knell. If Feyre didn't survive the labor, Cassian's knees threatened to buckle. RHY's face was tight with pleading and pain. I never thought it'd turn out like this, Rhys said quietly. Amren massaged her temples again. We can discuss the idiocy of this bargain later. Feyre glared at her, and Amren glared right back before saying to Cassian, You and Azriel need to retrieve Eris. Why not you? Feyre pinched the bridge of her nose. Because Amren is powerless, Amren snarled. You can say it, girl. Feyre winced. More left for Valahan this morning and is out of our Damati magic's range. Izzy can't go in alone. We need you. Cassian. Cassian stilled. They just waited. For Nesta to participate in the Blood Rite, to risk every horror and misery while he went off to save fucking Eris. Let him die. As tempting as that is, Feyre said, he poses a great danger to us in Brylan's hands. If he's under the Crown's influence, he'll reveal everything he knows. She asked Cassian, what does he know about us, exactly? Too much. Cassian cleared his throat. Through their own bickering, through his need to goad Eris, he'd revealed too much. He was worried about what we'd do with Nesta as a Night Court power, and with all three objects of the Dread Trove at our disposal. He thought the Night Court might turn around and attempt some sort of power grab. Feyre said hopefully, maybe the Maid Dagger we gave him will grant him immunity from the Crown. If he's carrying the dagger, if they haven't unarmed him, it might shield him against another Maid object. But we don't know that, Rhys countered, and he'll still be in Brylan's clutches. She might be able to sense the dagger herself, and it might respond to her. Az added darkly, and there are plenty of other methods to get him to talk. Amren cut in, you need to go now. She turned to Feyre and Rhys. We will return to Valaris and have a nice, long talk about this bargain of yours. Cassian didn't bother to read Feyre's and Rhys's expressions as he gazed toward the small window, the wilderness beyond, as if he could see Nesta there. He summoned his armor, the intricate scales and plates clamping with reassuring familiarity over his body. I trained Nesta well, trained them all well, he said, his throat working. He added into the silence as Az tapped his siphons and his own armor appeared. If anyone can survive the Blood Rite, it's them. If they could find each other. Nesta broke into a flat-out sprint toward the tree with the knife, the male launching into movement only a heartbeat afterward. He tripped over the scattered bodies, but Nesta kept her knees up, a mirror of every footwork exercise they'd done with the ladder on the ground, as if those bodies were the rope rungs to avoid. Muscle memory kicked in. She barely glanced at the tangle of limbs as she aimed for the tree, but the male had found his footing and closed in fast. Someone had to have planted the weapon, either under the cover of darkness last night or weeks ago. The Blood Rite was savage enough without true weapons, only the weapons they made, but with actual steel thrown in. The male had a good 6 inches and 100 pounds on her. In physical combat, he'd possess every advantage. But if she could get that knife... Nesta broke free of the bodies, legs flying as she ran the last few feet to the tree trunk with her hand outstretched. She brushed the knife's handle. The male barreled into her with all the force of a full-grown Illyrian warrior. The breath whooshed out of her at the impact as they went down and over the hill's edge on the other side of the tree. They tumbled toward the streambed 100 feet below, flipping as they careened down the side of the hill. Rocks and leaves cracked and scratched against her. Wings snapped above and below her. Her hair lashed her face as her hands grappled. Nesta slammed into the streambed so hard her spine groaned, the male landing atop her, sending every remaining scrap of breath exploding from her lungs. His wings twitched, but he did not move. Nesta opened her eyes to find herself staring into his unseeing gaze, to find her hand clenching the dagger she'd buried in his throat, soaked in warm blood. Grunting, Nesta rolled him off, left the dagger sticking out of his throat, blood still leaking from the wound. The knife had pierced all the way through to the nape of his neck. Nesta spat a mouthful of blood onto the dry stones. Her nightgown was covered in blood and dirt, her skin raw and stinging, but she was alive, and the male was not. Nesta allowed herself to inhale slowly through her nose for a count of 6. She held the breath, then slowly loosed it, did the breathing exercise twice more, assessed the state of her body, from her pounding head to her torn feet, breathed again. When her mind had stilled, Nesta pulled the knife from the male's throat, then stripped off his clothes item by item, including his boots. She dressed herself with cold efficiency, shucking off the bloody nightgown and dropping it onto the male's face in a mockery of a funeral shroud, then tucked the knife into the belt she cinched as tight as it would go. The clothes hung off her, and the 2 big boots might be a liability, but it was better than the nightgown. And then she went to find her friends. Chapter 65. Nesta scaled the other side of the valley to find the land beyond empty of warriors. Behind her, across the small ravine, the others still slept. No sign of Emery or Gwyn amongst them. No sign of where they might be either. Cassian had told her while lying in bed one night, sweaty and spent, that there were 3 dumping grounds for the Rite, one in the north, one in the west, and one in the south. Her friends had to be in the others, either together or one in each. They'd be terrified when they awoke. Gwyn. Nesta refused to consider it as she hurried through the pines, putting distance between herself and the sleeping warriors before she found a towering tree. She climbed, sap quickly coating her fingers, and when she cleared the canopy, Ramiel might as well have been across an ocean. It loomed straight ahead, with 2 mountains and a sea of forest, and the gods knew what else between her and its barren slopes. It looked identical to Feyre's painting. She peered at the sun, then at the trunk below her, searching for moss. There, just below her left foot. Ramiel was east, so she'd been dumped in the west, and the others. She had to pick either north or south. Or would she be better off heading for the mountain and hoping she found them along the way? She scoured her memory for any advice Cassian might have offhandedly given her. Cassian, maybe he was already on his way to save her. The bubble of hope in her chest ruptured. He couldn't rescue her. He'd informed her himself about the laws forbidding such a thing. He'd be executed, and so would she. Even Rhys and Feyre couldn't stop it. Cassian wasn't coming to save her. No one was coming to save her, or Emery or Gwyn. Nesta flexed her fingers, working some movement back into them after sitting still for so long. She swore softly at the blood that dribbled from the few small cuts on her hands. They should have healed by now, but the magic that bound the Rite also suppressed any healing magic within a fairy's blood, apparently, including her own. Any wounds could be fatal, would heal at a human, mortal pace. Nesta allowed herself to take another few slow, steadying breaths. She could do this. would do this. She'd save her friends and herself. Shouting echoed from far behind her. The others were waking, cursing. Nesta hurried down the tree, bark and pine needles sticking to her sap-crusted hands. She had to pick a direction and be running by the time she hit the bottom. The shouting behind her became accented by screams. She glanced back, making sure no one was gaining on her. And as she did, she caught a flash of light from the woven bracelet on her left wrist, from the little silver charm in the middle, glinting in the light. No, it was glowing. Nesta brushed a fingertip over the charm. It buzzed against her skin. Dread sluiced through her, a pricking at her nape as if a soft voice whispered, "Hurry." Nesta twisted to better see it against the sun, but the light within the charm vanished. Nesta pivoted northward. The charm shone again. Brows rising, she angled her arm to the east. Nothing. South. Only a faint glow. No sense of urgency, of pure panic. But north, the charm blazed, and again that dread filled her. Nesta sucked in a breath, remembering that night in the house when they'd made the bracelets, remembering her wish for them. The courage to go out into the world when we are ready, but to always be able to find our way back to each other, no matter what. She'd made the charms into beacons, and whichever of her friends lay to the south wasn't in nearly as much danger as the one to the north. The land that way was uphill, a small blessing. The other warriors would likely choose the fastest and easiest way to Ramiel and avoid a route that involved climbing. But how could the charms work here? The rite banned magic, both from a wielder and from any objects, unless the power surrounding the rite didn't stifle made items. Fey spells had to be carefully worded. Perhaps whoever had woven this spell for the Illyrians had never considered the possibility of a made item winding up in the rite. Her own power lay dormant, though. She strained inward, reaching for it, but only emptiness met her. Her throat tightened. She was herself a made thing, and yet she was a person, too. The magic recognized her as a person and not a thing. She hadn't realized how badly she'd needed to be shown that distinction. She inhaled the pine and distant promise of snow. Alive. Even in this hellscape, she was alive. And she'd make sure her friends were, too. Exhaling slowly, mastering her breath, Nesta lowered her arm and began moving. Her two big boots hit the ground, her toes shifting within them. By the time Nesta straightened, checking the knife at her side, she was already heading north. It occurred to Nesta after 10 minutes of running uphill, the glimmering charm still urging her along, her feet in those infernal boots slipping this way and that she needed water and food, and would need shelter before sunset, and would have to decide whether to risk a fire or possibly die from cold just to avoid being found. The clothes she'd swiped off the mail weren't thick enough to help her survive the night, and if the gray sky was any indication, snow or rain might be imminent. But no warriors were on her tail. At least she had that, unless they were as stealthy as Cassian and Azriel. The thought had her checking her frantic pace, silencing her steps, tucking the bracelet and glowing charm into her sleeve to hide its gleam in the dimness, trying to leave scant evidence of her passing as she scaled a particularly steep hill and surveyed the terrain beyond. More trees and rocks, and Nesta dropped to the ground as an arrow whizzed past. Fucking arrow. The knife hadn't been a fluke. Someone had dumped weapons in the Blood Rite. Nesta scanned the terrain behind her for the arrow, there stuck in the base of a tree. She slid back down the hill until she reached it, pried it free, and tucked it into her belt. Then climbed the hill again, keeping low as she peered over the crest once more. and came face to face with a razor-sharp arrowhead. "Get up," the warrior growled. With every leap Cassian flew around the queen's once-shared castle, Cassian cursed Eris for being stupid enough to get captured. Now this was Brylan's stronghold, he supposed. Patches of snow still crusted the hilly, open land, though the first buds and sprouts of spring poked through. He kept high enough that breathing was difficult, so high that he'd appear no more than a very large bird to any human on the ground. But with his Fey eyesight, he could clearly make out what crossed the land. He saw nothing of Eris, though. No red hair, no lick of fire, no hint of his soldiers. Azriel, circling in the opposite direction, signaled that he hadn't seen anything either. It was an effort to stay focused, to keep flying, circling like vultures, when his mind drifted to the northwest, to the Illyrian mountains and the Blood Rite and Nesta. Had she survived the initial surge, the warriors would be waking by now. Fucking Eris. How could he have been reckless enough to let those soldiers get close? Cassian again scanned the terrain below, fighting to keep his breathing steady in the thin air. He'd find Eris swiftly, kick his ass if he had time. And what then? He couldn't do anything to help Nesta, but at least he could be closer to the right. Should the worst happen, he shut down the thought. Nesta would survive. Gwyn and Emery would survive. He'd allow no other alternative. Chapter 66. The Illyrian warrior was smaller than the one Nesta had killed, but this male had gotten his hands on a bow and arrow. "Give me your weapons," he ordered, eyes darting over her, noting the blood coating her face, crusting her chin and neck. Nesta didn't move, didn't so much as lower her chin. "Give me your fucking weapons," the male warned, voice sharpening. "Where did you come from?" she demanded, as if he didn't have an arrow pointed at her face. And then, before he had time to answer, was another female there? The male blinked, and it was the only confirmation Nesta needed before she handed over the arrow. Slowly reached for the knife. "Did you kill her too?" Her voice had dropped to pure ice. "The crippled bitch? I left her to the others." He grinned. "You're better prey anyway." Emery. She couldn't be far off if this male had already seen her. Nesta pulled the knife free. The male kept the arrow pointed. "Drop it and back up 10 paces. Emery was alive, and nearby, and in danger. And this motherfucker wouldn't stop Nesta from saving her." Nesta bowed her head, shoulders slumping in what she hoped the male believed was a show of resignation. Indeed, he smiled. He didn't stand a chance. Nesta lowered the knife and flicked her wrist, fingers splaying as she let it soar toward the male, right into his groin. He screamed, and she charged as his hand loosed on the bow. She slammed into him and the weapon, the string slapping her face hard enough to draw tears, but they crashed down, and he was shrieking. No one would stand between her and her friends. Her mind slid to a place of cold and calm. She grabbed the bow, flung it away. As the male writhed on the ground, trying to wrench out the knife piercing his balls, she leaped upon it, shoving it in harder. His scream sent birds scattering from the pines. Nesta twisted the blade free, leaving him lying there. She grabbed the 2 arrows but didn't bother freeing the quiver pinned beneath his back. She retrieved the Illyrian bow, snatched her knife, and ran in the direction from which he'd come. His howls followed her for miles. A river announced its presence well before Nesta reached it. So did the warriors on its near bank, tentatively speaking with each other. Feeling each other out, she guessed, as they filled what seemed to be canteens. Like someone had left those too. No sign of Emery. She kept behind a tree, downwind, and listened. Not a whisper about Emery or another female, just tense rulemaking about the alliances they were forming, how to reach Ramiel, who had left the weapons and canteens for them. She was about to hunt for an easy spot to cross the river, away from the males, when she heard, "Pity that bitch escaped. She'd have made for good entertainment on the cold nights." Everything in Nesta's body went still. Emery had made it to this river, alive. Another said, drinking from the rushing water, "She's probably washed halfway down the mountain. If she isn't dead from the rapids, the beasts will get her before dawn." Emery must have jumped into the river to get away from these males. Nesta ran her fingers across the bow slung over her shoulder. The arrows in her belt hung like weights. She should kill them for this. Fire these 2 arrows into 2 of them and kill them for hurting her friend. But if Emery had survived... She pushed off the tree, slipped to the next, and the next, followed the river, her steps barely more than the whisper of water over stone. Through the pines, down the hills, the rapids increased, the rocks rising like black spears. A waterfall roared ahead. If Emery had gone over it, the rapids hurtled over the edge, to the bottom 100 feet below. No surviving that. Nesta's throat dried out, and dried out further as she beheld what lay across the river, caught on a fallen tree jutting from the rocky bank directly before the plunge to the falls. Emery. Nesta rushed to the edge of the water, but snatched her foot back from its icy fingers. Emery appeared unconscious, but Nesta didn't dare risk shouting her name. A glance at the sky revealed the sun at its mid-afternoon point, but it offered no heat, no salvation. How long had Emery been in the frigid water? "Think," Nesta murmured. "Think, think." Each minute in the water risked killing Emery. She lay too far away to discern any injuries, but she didn't stir against the branch. Only her twitching wings showed any sign of life. Nesta peeled off her clothes, wished she'd taken the nightgown to tie her knife and 2 arrows around her leg, rather than leave them on the shore, but she had no choice. She took the Illyrian bow, though, strapping it across her chest, the string digging into her bare skin. Naked, she eyed the distance between the falls, the rapids, the rocks, and Emery. "Rock to rock," she told herself, braced for the cold, and leaped into the water. Nesta gasped and sputtered at the icy shock, hands shaking so hard she feared she'd lose her grip on the slick rocks and be hurtled over the falls. But she kept going, aiming for Emery, closer and closer, until finally she swam frantically between the last rock and the riverbank, and Emery draped over the half-submerged tree beyond it. Shaking, teeth chattering, Nesta dragged Emery free of the branches and farther up the bank, then crouched over her. Emery's face was battered, her arm bleeding from a gash in her biceps, but she breathed. Nesta reined in her sob of relief and gently shook her friend. "Emery, wake up." The female didn't so much as moan in pain. Nesta searched through Emery's dark hair, and her fingers came away bloody. She had to get her across the river, find shelter, make a fire, and get them warm. The bow she'd carried wasn't enough to protect them. Not nearly. "All right, Emery." Nesta's teeth chattered so hard her face ached. "Sorry about this." She gripped her friend's nightgown and ripped it down the middle, baring Emery's thin, toned body to the elements. Nesta peeled off the nightgown and twisted it into a long rope, then unshouldered the bow. "You're not going to enjoy this part," Nesta said through her clacking teeth, hauling Emery back to the water. "Neither am I," she muttered, the icy water biting into her numbed feet. cold as the cauldron, cold as... Nesta let the thought pass, willing it to drift by like a cloud. Focused, she managed to get Emery into the water up to their waists, holding her as tightly as her shaking fingers would allow. Then she hoisted her friend onto her back and hooked the Illyrian bow around them both, letting the near-unbreakable string dig into her own chest so the wood rested against Emery's spine, tethering them together. Better than nothing. She looped Emery's limp arms around her shoulders, then took Emery's nightgown and wrapped it around her wrists, tying them in place. "Hold on," she warned, even though Emery remained an unmoving weight across her back. Rock to rock, just as she'd done before. Rock to rock and then back to the shore. Rock to rock, step to step. She'd done 10,000 steps in the House of Wind, had done more than that over these months. She could do this. Nesta moved deeper into the water, biting back her cry at its cold. Emery swayed and banged into her, and the Illyrian bow's string dug into Nesta's chest hard enough to slice the skin. But it held. Step to step to step. By the time Nesta returned to the far bank, shaking, near sobbing, the bowstring had drawn blood. But they were on solid land, and her clothes and weapons were there, and now to find warmth and shelter. Nesta laid Emery on the pine needles, covering her friend with the dry clothes she'd left behind, and gathered what wood she could carry. Naked, shaking, she could barely hold on to the sticks in her arms as she piled them near Emery. Her trembling fingers struggled to twist the sticks long enough to ignite a spark, to coax the kindling to a flame. But there, fire. She raided the area for fallen logs, praying they weren't too wet from the mists off the rapids to catch flame. When the fire was crackling steadily, Nesta slithered under her pile of clothes beside Emery and wrapped her arms around her friend, their skin pressing close. They were both freezing, but the fire was warm, and beneath the male's large clothes the chill from the water began to fade. But they were utterly exposed to the world. If someone came by, they'd be dead. Nesta held Emery, feeling her body warm by increments, watching her breathing ease, feeling her own chattering teeth calm. Soon it would be night, and what would emerge in the dark? Nesta remembered Cassian's tales of the monsters that prowled these woods. She swallowed, wrapping her arms more tightly around Emery. She glanced at her arm, the charm still glowing faintly, only pointing southward now. A sole glimmer of hope, of direction. What had happened to Gwyn? Was she enduring her worst nightmares again? Was she? Nesta focused on her breathing, stilled her mind. She'd survive the night, help Emery, then find Gwyn. Around a river, she'd learned on her hike with Cassian, cave systems were often carved out by the water. But to find one, she'd have to leave Emery. Nesta glanced at the vanishing sun, then slipped out from under the pile of clothes. She covered Emery with leaves and twigs, added another log to the fire, and risked taking the male's jacket to wrap around herself. Nesta wore the boots, even though her blistered feet objected, and made a careful circle around the campsite, listening for anything. Anyone, scanning every rock and cleft boulder. Nothing. The sky darkened. There had to be caves around here somewhere. Where the fuck were they? Where? The entrance is here. Nesta whirled, dagger out, to find an Illyrian male standing 10 feet away. How he'd crept up. How he'd survived given the gash running down the side of his face. He noted her own wounds, her nakedness beneath the coat, the bare legs and the boots, the knife. Yet no lust or hatred clouded his brown eyes. The male carefully pointed to what she'd mistaken for a leaf-covered boulder. That's a cave. big enough to fit inside. Nesta drew herself up to her full height. Let him see the cold violence in her eyes. "You won't survive an hour on the ground once night falls," the male said, his boyishly charming face neutral. "And if you're not already scaling a tree, then I'm going to guess you've got someone hurt with you." She revealed nothing. He lifted his hands. No weapons, no blood on him save the gash leaking down his face. "I came from the landing site to the west, where she'd come from. I saw the body in the gulch. You did that to Novius, didn't you? He was naked. You're in a male's clothes, and that must be the knife that pierced his throat. Do you know who the hell dumped weapons here?" Nesta kept her silence. Night deepened around them. The male shrugged when she didn't reply. "I decided to head northward, hoping to reach Ramiel by a less traveled path, avoiding conflict with the others entirely, if I can. I have no quarrel with you, but I am going into that cave now, and if you're smart, you'll bring whoever is with you and come inside, too. And have you take my weapons and kill me in my sleep?" The male's brown eyes flickered. "I know who you are. I'm not stupid enough to go after you. It's the blood rite. You'd be forgiven. Feyre Cursebreaker would not forgive me for killing her sister. So you do this to gain her favor? Does it matter? I swear an oath on Enalius himself not to kill you or whoever is with you. Take it or leave it. Not to kill us or harm us in any way, or have anyone you know do so either." A slight smile. "You adapted to the rules of the Fae quickly. But yes, I swear that too." Nesta's throat bobbed as she weighed the male's expression. Glanced to the hidden cave entrance behind him. "I need help carrying her." They didn't risk a fire in the cave, but the male, whose name was Balthazar, offered his thick wool cloak to cover Emery. Nesta slid Emery into the dead male's clothing, leaving herself wearing only the leather jacket, and though it went against every instinct, she allowed Balthazar to sit on her other side, his warmth leaking into her chilled body. "When dawn comes, be gone," Nesta said into the dark of the musty, leaf-filled cave as night fell. "If we survive the night, I'll be glad to go," Balthazar said. "The beasts of the woods might smell your friend's blood and track us right to this cave." Nesta slid her gaze to the young warrior. "Why aren't you out there killing everyone?" "Because I want to reach the mountain and become Oristjan. But if I meet someone I'd like to kill, I won't hesitate." Silence fell and remained. Within moments, branches snapped. Balthazar's body tightened, his breath becoming impossibly quiet. In the pitch black of the cave, the only sounds were the rustle of their clothes and the leaves beneath them. A howl rent the night, and Nesta flinched, clutching Emery closer to her side. But the snapping branches and howling moved off, and Balthazar's body relaxed. "It's just the first," he whispered into the blackness. "They'll prowl until dawn." She didn't want to know what was out there, not as screaming began in the distance. "Some can climb trees," Balthazar murmured. "The dumb warriors forget that." Nesta stayed silent. "I'll take first watch," the warrior said. "Rest. Fine." But she did not dare close her eyes. Nesta remained awake the entire night. If Balthazar knew she hadn't been sleeping during his watch, he didn't say. She'd used the time to do her mind-stilling exercises, which kept the edge off, but not entirely. The crackle of brush under the paws and talons of stalking beasts and the screaming of the Illyrians continued for hours. When Balthazar nudged her with a knee and she feigned waking, he only murmured that he was going to sleep and tucked himself against her. Nesta let herself soak up his warmth against the frigid cave air. Whether his deep breaths were true sleep or faked, as hers had been, she didn't care. Nesta kept her eyes open, even when they became unbearably sore and heavy, even when the warmth from her two companions threatened to lull her to sleep. She would not sleep, wouldn't lower her guard for one moment. Dawn eventually leaked through the lattice of branches, and the screams and howling faded, then vanished. A quick inspection in the dim light revealed that though her friend remained unconscious, the wound on Emery's head had stopped bleeding. But "You'll find plenty of clothes today," Balthazar said, seeming to read her mind. He stepped into the daylight and peered around, then cursed under his breath. Plenty of clothes. The words sent Nesta scrambling out of the cave. Winged bodies lay everywhere, many half-eaten. A brisk wind ruffled Balthazar's dark hair as he walked away. "Good luck, Archeron." Eris was nowhere to be found in the lands surrounding the Queen's castle. But Azriel had encountered a passing human merchant on the road from the palace, who hadn't hesitated when he'd been asked whether a Feymale had recently arrived. He readily supplied that a red-haired Feymale had been dragged into the castle the night before last. He'd heard in the tavern that the male was to be taken soon to another site. "We'll wait here until they leave the castle, then trail them from the cloud cover," Azriel said, face dark. Cassian grunted his agreement and dragged a hand through his hair. He'd barely slept, thinking of Nesta and of Feyre and Rhys. Cassian and Azriel hadn't discussed their brother's bargain, which would doom Rhys should Feyre not survive the labor. To lose her would be unbearable, but to also lose Rhys, Cassian couldn't think of it without feeling sick. Perhaps Amren was working on some way to undo the bargain. If anyone could think of a way, it would be her, or Helion, he supposed. Cassian and Azriel were beyond Rhys's and Feyre's Damati range, though. They'd have no news of anything. But he'd know if Nesta were dead. In his heart, his soul, he'd sense it, would feel it. A mate always did, even if she'd rejected that bond. Nesta had lived through the night, thanks to dumb luck and an Illyrian more interested in politics than killing. Exhaustion slowed every movement as Nesta picked her way through the dismembered bodies, peeling off whatever clothes were intact and not stained by blood or bodily fluids. Many of the warriors had pissed or shit themselves when the beasts of the forest had found them. Finding a clean pair of pants was a tall order. But Nesta gathered enough, including a smaller pair of boots for herself and one set for Emery, and picked up another dagger, 2 canteens of water, and what seemed to be someone's half-eaten rabbit dinner. By the time she returned to the cave, dressed, watered, and with half a leg of rabbit in hand, Emery was awake. Weak, but awake. She said nothing as Nesta handed her the meat and the water, then helped her dress. Only when Nesta eased her out of the cave and Emery surveyed the carnage did she rasp, "Gwyn!" Nesta, her arm looped around Emery's middle, lifted her free hand, the one with the bracelet on her wrist. She slowly pointed her arm in each direction. "South," she said when the charm gleamed. Gwyn's general location hadn't changed since yesterday. Emery sucked in a breath, lifted her own bracelet to the south. The charm glittered almost frantically now, emitting an urgent sense of needing to move, to act, to be swift. Wonder flashed in Emery's eyes before sharpening to grim focus. "Let's hurry." Chapter 67. Emery confirmed that she'd been attacked and chased by the males Nesta had spied at the river. She'd leaped in as a final shot at survival, hit her head on a rock, and remembered nothing until the cave. Nesta gave her a swift, brutal rundown of her own encounters as they picked their way southward, mostly keeping silent to listen for any passing Illyrians. A few solo warriors ignored them as they trudged past, covered in blood, all heading east. A few packs battled each other, and many more bodies lay on the cold earth. They scanned for any gleam of copper hair, but they saw and heard no sign of Gwyn. They did not speak of whether their charms might be leading them toward a body. The day passed, and they found another cave as night fell, huddling together for warmth. Emery insisted on taking the first watch, and Nesta slept at last. When her friend woke her, Nesta had the feeling that Emery had let her doze for longer than she should have. In the morning, they emerged to find blood mixed with the snow on the ground. The animal tracks around the mouth of the cave were large enough to roil Nesta's stomach. Soon, snow began falling in earnest, enough to veil the world ahead and behind, and any enemies with it. They shivered with each step southward, though they piled on extra jackets from fallen warriors, and as the morning crept toward midday, Nesta flexed her fingers to keep her hands from freezing through. If she survived, she'd never again complain about the summer heat. Never again take for granted her coat and hat and gloves and that stupid scarf Cassian had made her wear out of her apartment all those months earlier. "I smell fire," Emery murmured. They'd last spoken hours ago, concentrating instead on staving off the cold that was so deep it made their teeth ache. They halted behind two pines, surveying the terrain, the snow-heavy sky. Nesta consulted her charm. "That way," she said, inclining her head to the left. "The fire is also in that direction. The wind's carrying the smoke down from that ridge." "It could be Gwyn's fire," Emery suggested hopefully. Nesta nodded, calming her pounding heart. They inched along, darting from tree to tree, listening for any danger around them, any hint of Gwyn ahead. They'd been moving for several minutes when the laughter reached them. Male laughter. Emery's face paled as she held her bracelet toward the source of the laughter. Its charm glowed, glinting even in the sun's weak winter light. "Keep downwind," Nesta said grimly. "We'll take the ridge from the southern side." A nightgown hung on a branch near the camp's edge. Nesta's stomach rose, her meager breakfast burning her throat. A soft inhale of breath from Emery was her friend's only sign of dread and pain as they climbed the last of the ridge toward the warriors camped atop it. They were boasting about the males they'd killed, the remaining trek toward Ramiel. Nesta strained to hear any hint of a female amongst them. If Gwyn's nightgown was hanging from a tree, then Gwyn. To hell with reaching Ramiel. She'd spend the rest of the week here, killing them all slowly. The crest of the ridge lay 10 feet above. Nesta controlled her breathing, keeping it silent and shallow, as the Valkyries had done. A glance at Emery told her the female was doing the same, even as rage kindled in her dark eyes. They'd decided before they ascended the slope that, as Emery's wings arced too high above her head, Nesta would assess what lay beyond the ridge. Emery held 2 knives. Nesta had 1 dagger and the Illyrian bow and 2 arrows. Nesta would have to use her peek to gather information about what weapons the males had, too. They swapped one final look, just as the males burst into laughter, and Nesta rose, only high enough for her vision to clear the ridge's edge. 10 males sat around a fire eating. Some had axes, some had swords, some had knives. Nesta picked out the male in the middle, laughing and talking the loudest, as the leader. His face, she'd seen his face before, somewhere. No sign of Gwyn. Nesta ducked back down, pivoting toward Emery. But Emery was gone, dragged halfway down the slope and held between 2 grinning males. No one went in or out of the towering, gray-stoned castle. Azriel and Cassian took turns circling it from high above, waiting for any sign of a departing group, but the gates did not open. Nobody even came or departed from the walled city surrounding it. As if the gates had been locked, its people kept within. No villages dotted the hills around it, either. The castle seemed to have risen out of the earth and settled there, squatting like some enormous beast over the land. "Brylin has to know we're here," Cassian said as he alit, his latest aerial survey completed. "You think she's waiting for us to make a move?" "I think the better question is if Eris is still alive," Azriel murmured, shadows whispering in his ear. "I can't get a read on it." "Waiting is pointless. We should break in, keep out of sight, so she won't even know we're there and be tempted to use the crown on us. I told you, the place is guarded with as many wards as the House of Wind. If Brylin is moving Eris, we'll be better off catching him then. Maybe the merchant was wrong. Maybe we'll continue surveillance through tomorrow." Azriel crossed his arms. "I know you want to help Nesta. Maybe Amren can find some loophole in the laws." Cassian swallowed hard. "There's no loophole. If I interfere, we're both dead. And even if I did, Nesta would kill me if I jumped in to save her. She'd never forgive me for it." He'd had nothing else to do except contemplate it these past days. Nesta's fate was her own. She was strong enough to forge her own path, even through the horrors of the Blood Rite. He'd taught her the skills to do so himself. And even if the laws had allowed it, he would never take that away from her, the chance to save herself. "I didn't think you'd be stupid enough to fall for the nightgown, but I suppose that's the difference between a female thinking she's a warrior and the real thing," the cold-faced leader said as Nesta and Emery were hurled at his booted feet. He chuckled, eyes glassy enough that Nesta wondered if someone had smuggled in a case of wine along with the weapons. "Hello, Emery." Nesta recognized the male then. Bellius, Emery's hateful cousin. Emery only spat. "Where the fuck is she?" Bellius shrugged. "Found the nightgown a few miles ago. Perhaps some other warrior fucked and killed her." His smile held. "Nothing but evil. You shouldn't have come here, cousin," Emery retorted. "I was brought here against my will, cousin, but now I'll enjoy proving you and your father wrong." His teeth shone in the dim, snowy light through the forest canopy. "You've disgraced your father, disgraced our family." Nesta eyed her weapons at the male's feet, all seated upon Emery's capture. "Was it you who sabotaged the rite with these weapons?" Nesta seethed. Bellius chuckled again, though his eyes remained hazy. Flakes of snow gathered in his dark hair. "I wouldn't call it sabotage, and neither did she." Nesta froze. She'd seen that glassy-eyed look before, on the faces of Eris's soldiers. And that word, she. Had Brylin somehow ensnared Bellius with the crown? He'd looked glassy-eyed when she'd seen him in Emery's shop months ago, when he'd recently come back from a scouting trip to the continent. Brylin must have intercepted him then, perhaps used the crown to influence the Illyrians to break their sacred rules of the rite, to plant the weapons here. But why? Bellius said to Emery as the female shook with rage. "You know I can't let you leave here alive. Our family would never recover from the shame." "Fuck you," Emery snarled. "Fuck your family." Bellius just eyed Nesta, smiling faintly. He brushed the snow from the shoulders of his jacket. "I get first crack at the high fae bitch," he said to his warriors. Nesta's gut churned, acid burning through her. She had to find some way out of this, even outnumbered, unarmed, with no magic. The pure panic and rage in Emery's face told her that her friend, too, was coming up short on any solution. Bellius stepped toward them, and then blood splattered across the side of his face as the guts of one of his cronies spilled onto the snow before him. The thing that crawled over the ridge had been crafted of nightmares. Part cat, part serpent, all black fur and sharp claws and hooked teeth. It halted at the edge of the camp. didn't look down at the gutted corpse of the warrior whose abdomen it had sliced open with a single swipe. Blood stained the snow around him in a wide circle. The warriors, Bellius with them, readied themselves. Bellius drew his sword. The creature leaped. Warriors screamed, weapons flashing in the bloodied, shrieking fray. "Run!" Nesta ordered Emery, surging to her feet. She snatched her weapons, and Emery lunged to grab a sword as it flew from a warrior's hand and into the snow. A female voice rang out from the other side of the ridge. "Here!" Nesta nearly sobbed at the voice, at the coppery head of hair that popped up, the hand beckoning as Bellius and his male squared off against the thing tearing into them. Nesta and Emery reached the hilltop's edge and slid down, snow spraying. Gwyn waited on its other side, bloodied and in a warrior's clothes, face filthy and torn, but eyes clear. "Follow me," Gwyn breathed, and they wasted no effort arguing as they half fell down the hillside and sprinted through the trees, aiming to the southeast. They ran until the warrior's screams, the beast's roars, were distant, until they faded away entirely. They stopped near a trickle of a stream through the snow, panting so hard Nesta had to lean against a tree. "How?" Emery gasped out. "I woke up before the others," Gwyn said between breaths, a hand on her chest. "So did I," Nesta said. "I thought it was because I'm made, but maybe it's because you and I aren't Illyrian." Gwyn nodded. "I started running and found a cache of weapons almost immediately." She gestured to the blood on her Illyrian leathers. "I changed from the nightgown into someone else's clothes. From a body. She held up her wrist. "Did you know this thing glows? I remembered your wish for us, that we'd always be able to find our way back to each other, no matter what. I figured it would lead me to you. It must be somehow immune to the magic ban in the rite." She smiled crookedly at Nesta. "I kept to the trees the first 2 nights, watching the beasts, and I spotted that horrible male and his companions this morning. Saw they'd found my nightgown and displayed it, and I knew they were hunting for you. I thought I'd take them out before they could find you. You led the beast right to them." "I learned where the beasts sleep during the day," Gwyn said, "and that they get very angry when awoken." She pointed to the cuts on her face, her hands. "I barely outran that one as I led it toward the camp. My timing was just good luck, though." Emery shuddered. "The mother watched over us." Nesta could have sworn the charms on their bracelets let out a soft, singing hum at that. But Gwyn winced. "He's really your cousin?" "I hope I can refer to that sad fact in the past tense after this," Emery said coolly. Nesta offered her a savage smile. "We need to keep moving. If Bellius or any of his friends survive, they'll want to kill us even more now." For more days. They had to last for more days. Gwyn said hoarsely as they moved into the wilderness, the snow mercifully lightening. "You two came looking for me." "Of course we did," Emery said, interlacing her hand with Gwyn's, then Nesta's, and squeezing tightly. "It's what sisters do." Chapter 68. Nesta far preferred caves to trees. But as night fell and no caves revealed themselves, she found herself with no other option but to scale one behind Emery and Gwyn, the latter revealing how she'd managed to rest while up one. A long stretch of rope. It must have been one of the items Queen Brylin had the Illyrians leave, presumably for trussing captives or stringing them up or strangling them, and Gwyn had used it to bind herself to the trunk of a tree each night. It was long enough that the 3 of them, sitting side by side on a massive branch, were able to tie themselves together and to the tree itself. "How'd you avoid the creatures climbing up to eat you?" Emery asked Gwyn, who was wedged between her and Nesta. They were pulling Illyrians off the branches like apples. Maybe because I don't smell like an Illyrian, Gwyn said, frowning at her clothes. Despite these, she nodded to Nesta. You don't either. If we're lucky, our scents will mask Emery's. Perhaps, Nesta said, voice quieting as the night deepened. The snow had finally stopped hours ago, and even the whipping wind had eased. A small miracle. Gwyn peered forward to look at Emery. How much do you know about the rite? Emery tucked her hands under her armpits for warmth. A good amount. My father and brother, and my horrid cousins, talked about it endlessly. Any family gathering, all the males told and retold their oh-so-glorious tales from their own rites. How many they killed, the beasts they escaped. None of them ever made it to Ramiel, though. Emery nodded to Nesta. They always hated that about Cassian, and Rhysand and Azriel. They hated that the three of them made it to the very top and won the whole thing. The mountain is that hard to climb? Gwyn asked, voice hushed. Emery grunted. Hard to reach, harder to climb. It's covered in jagged rock that slices you up like a cheese grater. Nesta shuddered. And with our healing slowed to a human rate thanks to the rules of the rite, Emery went on, we'll be lucky to make it to the pass of Inalius in one piece. What's that? Nesta asked. Emery's eyes shone. Long ago, so long ago they don't even have a precise date for it. A great war was fought between the Fae and the ancient beings who oppressed them. One of its key battles was here in these mountains. Our forces were battered and outnumbered, and for some reason, the enemy was desperate to reach the stone at the top of Ramiel. We were never taught the reason why. I think it's been forgotten. But a young Illyrian warrior named Inalius held the line against the enemy soldiers for days. He found a natural archway of stone amongst the tangle of boulders and made that his bottleneck. He died in the end, but he held off the enemy long enough for our allies to reach us. This rite is all to honor him. So much of the history has been lost, but the memory of his bravery remains. As Cassian's name would last through history, Nesta thought, would her own? Some small part of her wished for it. There are a few different paths to the top of Ramiel, Emery went on, but the hardest one, the most infamous, is the one that takes you through the pass of Inalius, through the archway of stone. They call that path the Breaking. Why am I not surprised that's the one Cassian and his brothers took? Nesta grumbled. Emery and Gwyn chuckled, but when a beast roared in the distance, they instantly fell quiet. Nesta murmured, we should take watches. They divvied them up, Nesta taking first watch, Emery second, and Gwyn third, and when that was decided, they sat in silence for a long moment. They'd eaten a meager meal of some roast squirrel. Gwyn had managed to pilfer from an unsuspecting Illyrian, but hunger remained a vocal knot in their bellies. Nesta leaned into Gwyn's warmth, let it seep through her bones, and prayed to whatever god might be listening that the rumbling of their stomachs wouldn't reveal them to the beasts below. The fourth day brought sun, bright enough to make the snow blinding, even in the shadows of the pines. Gwyn had climbed their tree to its summit, then estimated that Ramiel lay days away to the northeast, leaving them, should they make it, a day to climb its barren face. I couldn't see if anyone else was ahead, Gwyn announced, but there's a massive ravine nearby with a small wooden bridge. We must be the first to find it. If anyone else had, they would have destroyed the bridge to prevent further use. We need to reach it before the others do. How far ahead? Nesta asked, checking the knife at her side, the rope she'd coiled over a shoulder and the Illyrian bow there. Emery had the sword she'd snatched from Bellius's camp, and Gwyn bore a shield and a knife of her own. Several hours if we can run it, Gwyn said. Running risks attention, Emery warned. Walking risks losing the bridge, Nesta countered. The three of them looked at each other. Run then, Gwyn said, and they nodded. They set a light pace, meant to keep their steps silent and easy even with the snow underfoot. But running after days of exhaustion, limbs stiff with cold and belly mostly empty, made Nesta's head pound. "We've got company," Emery panted, and the three of them halted. Not 500 yards away stood 6 males. "Do you think they know about the bridge?" Gwyn breathed. As soon as she said it, the males burst into a sprint, not toward them, but toward the ravine. Swearing, Nesta launched into movement with Gwyn and Emery close behind, snow flying at their feet. "Hurry!" she shouted. Through the trees ahead, the world lightened, as if the forest had stopped. She realized, at the ravine's edge, now equidistant between them and the males. Whoever made it first would cut the bridge behind them. And if they both reached the bridge at the same time, "We have to intercept them," Nesta panted. Well before they reached the bridge, she altered her trajectory abruptly, and Emery and Gwyn moved with her as one. The males aiming for the bridge seemed to realize their enemy was now coming right at them. They slowed, reaching for their weapons. Nesta found her target, a male with a good foot on her, and swiped with her dagger as she careened into him. He'd been running fast enough that he lost his balance and went down as he dodged her blow, precisely where she wanted him, right in front of Emery. Nesta pivoted to the next male as her friend drove her sword into the first male's chest. The next male Nesta attacked was ready, swiping with a short sword. She ducked, twirling away, allowing him to land the blow on Gwyn's shield, just as Gwyn ducked, slashing across his shins with a dagger. The 4 others. Nesta weaved and bobbed against another male, dagger to dagger. Each movement sang in perfect harmony with her breath. Each pivot of her body, her limbs, was part of a symphony. The male swung broadly at Nesta, and she glimpsed her opening. She let his blow go wide before slamming her elbow into his nose. Bone met bone with a crunch that rang through her. He went down with a grunt, and Nesta's blade slashed silver and red across his throat. She didn't let herself feel the warm slickness of his blood. Another male already charged at her, and Gwyn shouted Nesta's name, grabbing her attention just before the priestess chucked a shield to her. Nesta caught it, spinning in the snow on one knee as she absorbed the impact of its weight. Expelling her breath in a mighty exhale, she lifted the shield high as the male brought down a sword meant for her head. Nesta met the blow, thrusting the shield upward and knocking the male off balance. She slammed her knife into his boot. He screamed, falling backward, and Nesta leaped to her feet, swinging the shield so hard it dented as it slammed into his head. The reverberations bit into her hand and forearm, but she kept her grip on the shield. Nesta whirled to the next opponent, but her friends had halted. The males around them were down. Utter silence filled the snowy forest. Even the birds in the pines had stopped chirping. "Valkyries," Emery said, eyes blazing bright. Nesta grinned through the blood she knew was splattered on her face. "Hell yes. For fucking days," Cassian hissed from where he and Azriel monitored the castle. "We've been sitting on our asses for 4 fucking days." Azriel sharpened truth-teller. The black blade absorbed the dim sunlight trickling through the forest canopy above. "It seems you've forgotten how much of spying is waiting for the right moment. People don't engage in their evil deeds when it's convenient to you." Cassian rolled his eyes. "I stopped spying because it bored me to death. I don't know how you put up with this all the time." "It suits me." Azriel didn't halt his sharpening, though shadows gathered around his feet. Cassian blew out a breath. I know I'm being impatient. I know that. But you really think we shouldn't go up to that damned castle and peek inside? I told you. Their castle is too heavily warded and full of magical traps that would trip up even Elain. Beyond that, Brylan has the crown. I have no interest in explaining to Rhys and Feyre why you died on my watch, and even less interest in explaining it to Nesta. Cassian stared toward the castle. You think she's alive? The question haunted him with every breath these last few days. You'd know if she died, Azriel said, pausing his work and looking up at Cassian. He tapped his brother's chest with a scarred hand. Right here, you'd know, Cass. There are plenty of other unspeakable things that could be happening to her, Cassian said, voice thickening. To Emery and Gwyn. The shadows deepened around Azriel, his siphons gleaming like cobalt fire. We trained them well, Cassian. Trust in that. It's all we can do. Cassian's throat tightened, but emotion drew Azriel's gaze away. Cassian shot to his feet. Someone's leaving the castle. The two of them wordlessly launched into the skies, entering the cloud cover within moments. In the chill, thin air, Cassian glimpsed only what the gaps in the clouds offered. But it was enough. A small caravan had left the eastern city gates, departing down the bare road that led through the hills. I don't see a prison wagon, Cassian said over the wind. Azriel's gaze remained on the earth below. They don't need one, he said with quiet venom. Cassian had to wait until the next gap in the clouds to see. No, they hadn't needed a prison wagon, because riding atop a white horse at the front of the party, side by side with a hunched, small figure, was Eris. Stupid asshole, Cassian snarled. She snared him with the crown. No, Az said quietly. Look at his left. He's still got the dagger at his side. If he was in her thrall, he'd have already handed it over. So possessing another made object does protect him against the crown, which meant, traitor, Cassian spat. I don't know why I'm surprised. His hands curled into fists. Let's get him, drag his ass home, and tear him apart. He'd been drawn away from Nesta for this? For Eris's games? Azriel's voice cut through the howling wind. We follow them. Capture Eris now and we might not get anything out of him. At least not quickly. We trail them and learn just how far this betrayal goes. See who they're meeting with. It has to be important for them to leave the safety of the castle. There was no arguing with the logic of it, even if Cassian's heart screamed at him with every flap of his wings to fly back home. Nesta, Emery, and Gwyn hadn't even reached the bridge when a new group of males closed in, armed with bows and arrows. We can make it, Emery panted, sprinting at the head of their pack toward the bridge, now visible through the snow-crusted trees. We can outrun them. Arrows whizzed past. Emery hit the bridge first, the rickety contraption bouncing with her weight as she practically flew across it. Arrows thudded into the trees, the ground, the bridge posts, and Nesta didn't hesitate as she raced over the slats, not daring to look at the plunge below to a barren riverbed, only at Emery as she cleared the bridge. A scream of pain blasted behind them, and Nesta whirled at the end of the bridge to find Gwyn still on the other side with an arrow through her thigh. Down. Too close to the males closing in. Cut it! Gwyn roared. Get up! Nesta ground out. Get up! The priestess tried. She made it to her feet, but she'd never crossed the bridge in time. So Nesta took the Illyrian bow off her shoulder, took the coil of rope off too, and handed it blindly to Emery. Tie one end to that tree, and then around yourself. Nesta didn't wait to see if she was obeyed before she knotted the other end to the arrow, fitted the arrow into the bow. "We didn't learn archery," Emery breathed. But Nesta knocked the arrow in place, took aim, right at Gwyn, who eyed the rope tied to the arrow, the other end around the tree, and Emery, and understood. "My sister taught me." Nesta's arms trembled as she drew back the string. "A long time ago." Teeth gritted, grunting, Nesta strained for every inch, aimed for Gwyn as her friend ran toward the bridge, hobbling, face white with pain, leaving a trail of blood in the snow behind her. Nesta let the arrow soar as the first of the males broke through the trees. It flew true, landed in the snow at Gwyn's feet. The priestess grabbed the arrow and wrapped the rope around her middle, over and over again as she ran for the bridge. Nesta dropped the bow. Gwyn had reached the bridge's far side and was yelling, "Cut it, cut it, cut it!" The males cleared the trees. They raced toward the bridge and the limping Gwyn, gaining on her fast. Nesta had only to throw out a hand before Emery tossed the sword to her. Gwyn, limping halfway down the bridge, didn't stop moving. The males were only a few feet behind, crowding onto the rickety structure. Nesta brought the blade down upon the bridge's ropes. Even as the wood fell out from beneath her, Gwyn still seemed to be running, then leaping into the open air, only that rope around her middle to keep her from death as she began to plunge. But Nesta had grabbed onto the rope, dropping before the bridge post and wrapping her legs around it, holding on tightly as inch after inch of rough fiber ripped through her hands. Behind her, braced against the pine tree, Emery held on just as tightly. Gwyn fell toward the ravine floor, Illyrian males shrieking as they tumbled, untethered, with her. Nesta screamed, her palms on fire. Red coated the rope, but she clamped her torn hands tighter and breathed through the ripping, tearing sensation. Until Gwyn halted her plunge, yanked to a stop. The entire world seemed to suck in a breath as Nesta waited for the snap of the rope. But Gwyn only careened toward the rock face, grunting in pain as she hit. The Illyrians who had fallen had carried the only bows, thankfully, and the males on the other side cursed and spat. But Nesta and Emery paid them no heed as they hauled Gwyn upward, bloodied hands turning the rope redder still. Each pull had Nesta panting against the pain until Gwyn cleared the cliff edge, grimacing as the arrow through her thigh touched the ground. It had been a clean shot, but blood soaked her leg. Her face was already pale. "Fucking bitches!" one of the males roared. "Oh, shut up!" Emery bellowed across the ravine, helping Nesta lead Gwyn into the snowy trees, their breaths puffing out before them. "Find something new to call us." They managed to slide the arrow out of Gwyn's leg and bind it using an extra shirt they'd taken from a dead warrior. But the priestess still limped. Her face had grown ashen, and even propped up between Nesta and Emery, she kept their pace glacial. Yet they continued toward Ramiel, now visible ahead of them. They encountered no one else. It began snowing again around midday, and Gwyn's steps grew staggered, her breathing too labored. Soon Nesta and Emery were half carrying her between them. By the time evening fell, just getting Gwyn high into a tree took all their remaining strength. They secured themselves to its trunk with the bloodied rope, and Nesta and Emery idly plucked tiny rope fibers from their torn hands. They had no more food, only water. The next day was the same. Slow walking, snow flurries, ears straining for any hint of other warriors, too many breaks, only water to fill their bellies, and, as night fell, a new tree. But this tree was the very last before a barren slope rose above them like a black beast. They'd made it to the foot of Ramiel. Nesta awoke before dawn, checked that Gwyn breathed, that her leg hadn't become infected, and stared at the black and gray slope ahead. Far up, too far, lay its peak with the sacred black stone. 3 stars glinted above the mountain, Arctos and Eris to the left and right, Carinth crowning them. Their light flared and waned, as if in invitation and challenge. Cassian told me only 12 have made it this far, Nesta murmured to her friends. We've already earned the title of Aristian just by being here. Emery stirred. We could stay up here today, wait it out overnight, and be done at dawn. To hell with any titles. It was the wise thing to do, the safe thing to do. That path, Nesta said, pointing to a small one along Ramiel's base, could also take us down south. No one would go that way because it takes you away from the mountain. So we'd come all this way and just hide? Gwyn said, voice hoarse. You're hurt, Nesta countered, and that is a mountain in front of us. So rather than try and fail, Gwyn demanded, you would take the safe road? We would live, Emery said carefully. I'd love nothing more than to wipe the smirks off the lips of the males in my village, but not at this cost. Not if it costs us you, Gwyn. We need you to live. Gwyn studied Ramiel's craggy, unforgiving slope. Not much snow graced its sides, like the wind had whipped it all away, or the storms had avoided its peak entirely. Is it living, though, to take the safe road? You're the one who's been in a library for 2 years, Emery said. Gwyn didn't flinch. I have, and I am tired of it. She surveyed the blood-soaked leather along her thigh. I don't want to take the safe road. She pointed to the mountain, to the slender path upward. I want to take that road. Her voice thickened. I want to take the road that no one dares travel, and I want to travel it with you too, no matter what may befall us. Not as Illyrians, not for their titles, but as something new, to prove to them, to everyone, that something new and different might triumph over their rules and restrictions. A cold wind blew off Ramiel's sides, whispering, murmuring. They call this climb the breaking for a reason, Emery countered gravely. Nesta added, we haven't eaten in days. We're down to the last of our water. To climb that mountain. I have been broken once before, Gwyn said, her voice clear. I survived it, and I will not be broken again, not even by this mountain. Nesta and Emery kept silent as Gwyn released a sharp breath. A commander from Hybern raped me 2 years ago. He had his soldiers hold me down on a table. He laughed the entire time. Tears gleamed in Gwyn's eyes. Hybern attacked in the dead of night. We were all asleep when they broke into the temple and began the slaughter. I shared a room with my twin, Katrin. We woke at the first of the screaming from the walls. Katrin was always the strong one, the smart and charming one. After our mother died, she took care of me, looked out for me, and that night, she ordered me to go protect Sangravo's children while she ran right for the temple walls. Gwyn's voice shook. When I reached the children's dorm, the slaughter was only a few halls away. I gathered the children and we ran for one of the catacomb tunnels. They were accessible through a trapdoor in the kitchen, and I'd gotten the last child in when I heard the soldiers coming. I knew they'd find us if I went and left the door uncovered, so I threw a rug over it and then moved the kitchen table atop it. I just finished moving the table when the soldiers found me. Nesta couldn't breathe. Gwyn stared at the mountain rising high above. Even the wind had seemed to quiet to hear her words. The screaming had stopped, and they had other priestesses with them, including Katrin. But their commander walked in and asked me where the rest of us were. They wanted the children, too, the girls. Nesta could hear Emery's thundering heart, its frantic beat echoing her own. Gwyn swallowed. I told him the children had taken the mountain road to get help. He didn't believe me, so he grabbed Katrin, because our scents were nearly identical, you see, and told me that if I didn't reveal where the children were, he'd kill her. And when I didn't give the children up, her mouth shook. He beheaded Katrin right there, along with 2 other priestesses, and then he told his soldiers to go to work on us. He claimed me. I spat in his face. Tears slid down her cheeks. And then he went to work. Nesta's heart cracked. I hadn't yet participated in the Great Rite, and we were so remote up there that I never had the chance to lie with a male, and he took that from me too. And then he called over 3 of his soldiers and told them to keep going until I revealed where the children had gone. Nausea roiled Nesta's gut. She couldn't have moved if she'd wanted to. The first had just unbuckled his belt when Azriel arrived. Silent, unending tears streamed down Gwyn's face. Azriel slaughtered all of them within moments. He didn't hesitate, but I could barely move, and when I tried to get up, he gave me his cloak and wrapped me in it. Morrigan arrived a few minutes later, and then Rhysand appeared, and it became clear some of the soldiers had gotten away with the piece of the cauldron. So Azriel headed after them. Mor healed me as best she could, then brought me to the library. I couldn't bear to be at the temple with the others, to see Katrin's grave and know I failed her, to see that kitchen every day for the rest of my life. The first 5 months I was at the library, I barely spoke. I didn't sing. I went to the priestess who counsels all of us, and sometimes I just sat there and cried or screamed or said nothing. And then I began working with Meryl upon Clotho's request, and the work focused me, motivated me to get out of bed each morning. I started singing during the evening service, and then you came along, Nesta. Gwyn's eyes slid to hers, brimming with tears and pain and hope, precious, beautiful hope. And I could tell something bad had happened to you, too. You were fighting it, though, not letting it master you. I knew Katrin would have been the first to sign up for training, so I did too. But even training these months hasn't erased the fact that I let my sister die. You asked me once why I don't wear the hood or the invoking stone. That stone is a sign of holiness. How can someone like me wear it? Gwyn stopped at last, as if waiting for them to damn her. But tears were running down Emery's face. They didn't halt as Emery took Gwyn's hand and said, "You are not alone, Gwyn. Do you hear me? You are not alone." Nesta took Emery's other hand as her friend went on. "We have suffered differently, but my father once beat me so badly he broke my back. He kept me in bed for weeks while I healed, telling people I was ill, but I wasn't. It was one of the lesser of his evils." She paused. "He beat my mother before that, and I think she shielded me from him, because he never laid a hand on me until she was gone, until he beat her so badly she couldn't recover. He made me dig her grave on a night with a new moon, and told people she'd miscarried a babe and died from blood loss." She angrily wiped a tear away. Everyone believed him. They always believed him. He was so charming to them, so smart. Whenever people told me how lucky I was to have such a good father, I wondered if I'd imagined all the bad parts. Only my scars, my wings reminded me of the truth. And when he died, I was so happy, yet they expected me to mourn him. I should have told them all what a monster he was, but I didn't. They had turned a blind eye to my wing clipping while he was alive. Why should they bother to believe the truth now that he was among the honored dead? Emery's nose crinkled. I still feel his fists on me, still feel the impact of him slamming my head into a wall, or crunching my fingers in a door, or just railing on me until I blacked out. She was shaking, and Nesta squeezed her hand tighter. He never gave me any money or allowed me to earn my own, never let me eat more than he deemed appropriate, and wormed his way so far into my mind that I still hear him when I look in the mirror or make a mistake. She swallowed. I came to training because I knew he'd have forbidden it. I came to training to get his voice out of my head, and to know how to stop a male if one ever puts another hand on me again. But none of it will ever bring my mother back, or the fact that I hid while my father took out his rage upon her. Nothing will ever make that right. But this mountain, Emery pointed to the small dirt path at the base of the peak. I'll climb it for my mother. For her, I'll face the breaking and go as far as I can. The two of them looked to Nesta, but her gaze remained upon the mountain, this peak, that path leading up to it, the hardest of all the routes. Finally, Nesta said, I was sent to the House of Wind because I had become such a wretch, drinking and fucking everything in sight. My family couldn't stand it. For more than a year, I abused their kindness and generosity, and I did it because she exhaled a shuddering breath. My father died during the war, before my eyes, but I did nothing to stop it. And then it all came out. She told the two of them every horrible thing she had done and thought and savored. Told them of the cauldron and its terror and pain and power. Told them the worst of her so that if they decided to risk climbing that mountain with her, they'd go into it with their eyes open, so that they could choose to pull back now. And when Nesta finished, she braced herself for the disappointment in their faces, the disgust. Gwyn's hand slid into hers, though. Emery tightened her grip on Nesta's other hand. 2. Neither of you is to blame for what happened, Nesta whispered. Neither of you failed anyone. Neither did you, Emery said softly. Nesta gazed at her friends and saw pain and sorrow in their tear-streaked faces, but also the openness of letting each other see the broken places deep inside, the understanding that they would not turn away. Nesta's eyes stung as Gwyn said, So we climb Ramiel, we take the breaking, we win to prove to everyone that something new can be as powerful and unbreakable as the old rules. That something no one has ever seen before, not entirely Valkyrie nor entirely Illyrian, can win the Blood Rite. No, Nesta said at last. We win to prove to ourselves that it can be done. She bared her teeth in a feral grin at the mountain. We win the whole damn thing. Chapter 69. Eris and the small caravan rode eastward for 3 days, stopping only to eat and sleep. Their pace was leisurely, and from the glimpses Cassian and Azriel got through the clouds, it seemed Eris was unchained. Bryalan's small, hunched figure rode at his side each day, but they caught no sign of the crown on her, no glint of gold in the sun. The Blood Rite would end the next day. Cassian had heard nothing of Nesta, felt nothing, but he'd barely slept, had hardly been able to keep his focus on the party ahead as they entered a low-lying forest beyond the hills, ancient and knotted and full of hanging moss. I've never been here before, Azriel murmured over the wind. It feels like an old place. It reminds me of the Middle. Cassian kept his silence, didn't speak as they trailed their quarry deeper into the wood to a small lake in its center. Only when the party halted at its dark shores did Azriel and Cassian land nearby, begin their silent tracking on foot. The group must not have been concerned about being overheard, because Cassian could make out their words from well beyond their campsite along the shore. 20 of them had gathered, a mixture of what looked like human nobility and soldiers. Eris's white stallion had been hitched to a branch, but the male, "Over here, Cassian," Eris crooned. Cassian whirled and found the High Lord's son holding a knife at his ribs. By midday, Nesta could barely breathe. Gwyn was dragging, Emery was panting, and they'd begun to ration their water. No matter how high they climbed, How many boulders they cleared along the narrow path. The peak grew no closer. They saw no one else, heard no one else. A small mercy. Nesta's breath singed her lungs. Her legs wobbled. There was only the pain in her body and the relentless circling of her thoughts, as if they were vultures gathering to feast. She just wanted to turn off her mind. Was it possible that the breaking wasn't merely physical but mental as well? That this mountain somehow dredged up every bit of her fear and sucked her mind deep into it? They halted for lunch, if water could be called lunch. Gwyn's leg was bleeding again, her face ghostly white. None of them spoke. But Nesta noted their haunted eyes, knew they heard their own horrors. They rested for as long as they dared, then moved again. Keep going upward. That was the only way, step to step to step. It looks like we're 2/3 of the way up, Emery rasped from ahead. Night had fallen, the moon bright enough to keep the breaking's path illuminated, to show those 3 stars above Ramiel's peak. Beckoning, waiting. If they reached it by dawn, it'd be a miracle. I need to rest, Gwyn said faintly. Just another minute. Her face was gray, her hair limp, the leathers along her legs soaked red. Emery had taken a spill on a loose rock 2 hours earlier and twisted her ankle. She was limping now as well. They were moving too slowly. The pass of Analius isn't too far ahead, Emery insisted. If we can make it through the archway, then it's a clear shot to the top. Gwyn breathed. I'm not sure if I can. Let her rest, Emery, Nesta said, sitting on a small boulder beside Gwyn. Dawn had to be 4 hours off, and then it would be over. Would it matter if they'd reached the peak by then? If they'd won, they'd gotten this far. How did they get here? Gwyn asked, swearing. Nesta went still. From her vantage point, she could see straight down, to where a beam of moonlight illuminated a familiar-looking male and 6 others climbing the mountain behind them, a good ways back but closing in. Bellius, Emery whispered. We need to go, Nesta said, lurching to her feet. Gwyn followed, wincing. Nesta sized up the males. Emery and Gwyn were too injured to fight, too exhausted, and put your arms around my neck, Nesta said, offering her back to Gwyn. What? Nesta did it for her. She had climbed the 10,000 stairs of the House of Wind, up and down, over and over and over again. Perhaps for this very moment. We're winning this fucking thing, Nesta said, bending to grab Gwyn's legs. Teeth gritted, Nesta hoisted Gwyn onto her back. The muscles in her thighs strained, but held. Her knees did not buckle. Her gaze lay on the terrain ahead. She would not look behind. So Nesta began to climb, Emery limping beside her. With the wind as their song, Nesta and Emery found their rhythm. They climbed, squeezing and slithering and hauling their weight. And the males fell behind, like the mountain was silently whispering, go, go, go. I knew you were a lying bastard, Cassian said through his teeth. Azriel, a step away, could do nothing. Not with Eris angling that knife, Nesta's dagger, into Cassian's ribs. He could have sworn flame seared into him where the knife met his leather. But this is low, even for you. Honestly, I'm disappointed in Rhys and, Eris said, digging the tip of the knife through Cassian's leathers enough for him to feel its bite, and that ripple of searing flame. Whether it was Eris's power through the blade or whatever Nesta had made it into, he didn't care. He just needed to find some way to avoid it piercing his skin. He's become so bland these days. He didn't even try to look into my mind. You can't win this, Azriel warned with quiet menace. You're a dead male walking, Eris. Have been for a long time. Yes, all that old business with the Morrigan. How boring of you to cling to it so. Cassian blinked. The Morrigan. Eris never referred to her like that. Let him go, Brylin, Cassian growled. Come play with us instead. The maid dagger slid away from his ribs, and a withered, reedy voice said from nearby, I'm already playing with you, Lord of Bastards. Nesta's legs shook. Her arms trembled. Gwyn was a half-dead weight at her back. The blood loss had made her so weak it seemed she could barely hold on. The breaking flowed through an archway of black stone where the path became broader and easier. The pass of Venalius. Emery had paused only long enough to run a bleeding hand over the stone, her dirty face full of wonder and pride. I am standing where none of my ancestors have been before, she whispered, voice choked. Nesta wished she could pause alongside her friend, could marvel with her, but to stop, even for a breath, Nesta knew that once she halted, she wouldn't be able to move again. The flattening of the path around the archway was only a temporary relief. They soon reached a cluster of stones, the last of the impossible climbing before it seemed to become a direct path to the top. Dawn remained a good 2 hours off. The full moon's light was beginning to fade as it sank toward the west. The group of males would catch them before the summit. Nesta's fingers spasmed as she reached for Emery's outstretched hand where her friend knelt atop one of the sharp boulders. If they could get past this section. Her knees buckled and Nesta went down, face smacking into a rock so hard stars burst across her vision. But all she could do was hold on to Gwyn as they tumbled and slammed into rocks and gravel and rolled downward, Emery's screams ringing in her ears, and then Nesta collided with someone hard. No, not someone, though she could have sworn she felt warmth and breath. She'd hit the archway of stone. They'd fallen all the way back down to the pass of Venalius, dangerously close to the males who pursued them. Gwyn! Alive! Her friend groaned. Emery slid to her knees on the path. Are you hurt? Nesta couldn't move as Gwyn untangled herself. The two of them were covered in dirt, debris, and blood. I can't, Nesta panted. I can't carry you anymore. Silence fell. So we rest, Gwyn managed to say. Then we continue. We'll never make it in time, Nesta said. Or at least before the males catch up. Emery swallowed. We try anyway. Gwyn nodded. Rest a minute first. Maybe the dawn will reach us before they do. No, Nesta peered down the path. They're climbing too fast. Again, silence. What are you saying? Emery asked carefully. Nesta marveled at the hope and bravery in their faces. I can hold them off. No, Gwyn said, voice sharpening. Nesta schooled her features into utter coldness. You are both injured. You will not survive the fight, but you can manage the climb. Emery can help. No. I can use the bottleneck of the path right there, Nesta plowed ahead, pointing to the space beyond the archway, to keep them off long enough for you two to reach the top, or dawn to come, whichever happens first. Gwyn bared her teeth. I refuse to leave you here. Emery's pained face told Nesta enough. She understood, saw the logic. Nesta said to Gwyn, It is the only way. Gwyn screamed, It is not the only way. And then she was sobbing. I will not abandon you to them. They will kill you. You need to go, Nesta said, even as her hands began shaking. Now. No, Gwyn wept. No, I won't. I'll face it with you. Something deep in Nesta's chest cracked open completely, and what lay within bloomed, full and bright and pure. She wrapped her arms around Gwyn, let her friend sob into her chest. "I'll face it with you," Gwyn whispered over and over again. "Promise me we'll face it together." Nesta couldn't stop her tears then. The chill wind froze them on her cheeks. "I promise," she breathed, stroking Gwyn's matted hair. "I promise." Gwyn sobbed, and Nesta let herself sob with her, squeezing her tightly, letting her stroking hand come to rest on Gwyn's neck. A pinch in the right spot, exactly on that pressure point Cassian had shown her, and it was done. Gwyn went down, unconscious. Nesta grunted, carefully lowering Gwyn to the ground as she peered up at Emery. Her friend's face was grave, but unsurprised. Nesta only said, "Can you carry her the rest of the way? It would be a feat in itself. Or at least keep going until dawn?" "I will." Nesta knew Emery would find that strength. She had a soul of steel. Emery laid her sword before Nesta, her dagger, the shield. "Keep the canteens," Nesta said, patting her own. "I've got enough." Another lie. "She'll never forgive you for this," Emery said. "I know." The males had risen higher. She didn't wait for Emery to speak before she helped ease Gwyn onto Emery's back, the latter hissing at the weight upon her wings, splaying them at awkward angles. Nesta tied the bloodied rope around them, binding them together. Emery grimaced, but managed to move a few steps. "Come with us," Emery offered, eyes lined with silver. Nesta shook her head. "Consider it the repayment of a debt." A tear slipped down Emery's cheek. "For what?" "For being my friends, even when I didn't deserve it." Emery's face crumpled. "There is no debt, Nesta." But Nesta smiled softly. "There is. Let me pay it." Swallowing back her tears, Emery nodded, hefted Gwyn higher and winced, but managed to hobble through the arch toward the rocks and the last stretch of the breaking, all the way up to the peak. Nesta did not say goodbye. She just inhaled through her nose, held the breath, then exhaled, repeated her mind stilling again and again, until her breath became the steady crash of waves and her heart became solid stone, and every inch of her body was hers to control. She was the rock against which the surf broke. These males would break against her, too. They had no choice. With Eris in Bryalan's grip, Cassian and Azriel could only follow the hunched, cloaked figure to the lake. Cassian didn't dare consider whether the crown was being used on him, if it'd be used on Azriel. The party in which Eris and Bryalan had traveled had dispersed, nowhere to be seen along the lake. Had they even been real, or just an illusion? A glance at AZ revealed his brother stone-faced, cold fury in his eyes. The hunched, cloaked figure stopped before the stones of the lake. Eris halted beside her. "Out with it, then," Cassian said. Bryalan drew back the hood of her cloak. There was nothing there. The material fell and pooled on the stones. Eris's face remained blank, empty. Just an animated kernel of magic. A slithering voice drawled from the lake. 30 feet from shore, standing atop the surface, floated a shadow. It shifted and warped, its edges fluttering, but it had the vague shape of a tall male. "Who are you?" Azriel demanded. But Cassian knew. "Kashii," he whispered. Nesta stood under the pass of Enalius for a long minute. She took out her canteen, drank the last of the water, chucked it to the side. She tucked the dagger into her belt, picked up the sword, and drew a line in the dirt in front of the archway. Her final stand, her last line of defense. Nesta gathered the shield, peered over her shoulder to where Emery had cleared the last cluster of boulders and now struggled up the long, straight path to the peak. A small, quiet smile passed over Nesta's face. Then she hefted her shield, angled her sword, and stepped beyond the line she'd drawn to meet her enemy. Chapter 70. Bellius sent his warriors through the bottleneck first, a wise move designed to wear Nesta down. She had no choice but to meet them. There were no hateful voices in her head, only the knowledge that her friends lay behind her, beyond the line she'd drawn in the earth, and she would not cede that line to these males. She would not fail her friends. She had no room for fear in her heart. Only calm, determination, and love. Nesta's lips curved in a smile as the first of the warriors ran at her, sword raised. She was still smiling when she lifted her shield to take the full impact of the blow. Nesta slammed her shield into the first male, sliced the shins of the second, and dispatched the third with a parry that sent him careening into the fourth and both of them tumbling to the ground. One for each breath, a movement for each inhale and exhale. She stilled her mind again, let it root her. For a heartbeat, she wondered what she might have done with ataraxia in her hand, what she might do with this body, these skills trained into her bones, if she was worthy of the sword at last. She'd opted for a name in the old language, a tongue no one had spoken in 15,000 years, a name Lanthes had laughed to hear. Nesta engaged 4 of the Illyrians at once, then 5, then 6, and the males started to go down, one after another. Nesta held the line in a storm of unflinching focus and death, guarding the friends at her back. Ataraxia, she had named that magic sword. Inner Peace. Chapter 71. The being that stood atop the lake was a shadow. It must be a reflection, Cassian thought. Smoke and mirrors. Where is Brylin? Azriel demanded, siphons flaring like cobalt flame. I spend so many months preparing for you, Cassian crooned. And you don't even wish to speak to me? Cassian crossed his arms. Let Eris go, and then we'll talk. He prayed Cassian didn't know of the maid dagger that Eris had again sheathed at his side, that the crown's aura of power had blinded even Brylin to its presence. But if the Death Lord got his hands on it, fuck. Cassian didn't let himself so much as glance toward the blade. You fell for it rather easily, Cassian went on. Though you took your time making contact, I thought you'd rush in for the kill, brute that you are. They could make out nothing of him beyond the shadows of his form. Even Azriel's own shadows kept tucked behind his wings. Cassian laughed, and Azriel stiffened, like his shadows had murmured a warning. His siphons flared again. Run, Az breathed, and the pure terror on his brother's face had Cassian spreading his wings, readying to launch. But his wings halted. His entire body halted. Azriel grabbed Eris and shot into the skies, the maid dagger with them. They had to get it far from Cassian, yet Cassian could not move. Cassian's siphons glowed like fresh blood, then sputtered out. Azriel shouted his name from high above. Cassian drifted closer to the shore. You can take him now, Brylin. You have plenty of time before dawn. A small, hunched figure emerged from behind the trees. A crone. A golden crown sat upon her head, right above her arched ears. Hate burned in her eyes. Cassian said, Tell my Vassa I'm waiting. His shadows swirled. Azriel soared back toward the ground, his siphons creating a blue orb of power encircling him. But Brylin had already reached Cassian. I have need of you, Lord of Bastards. The ancient-looking queen seethed. Cassian could say nothing, couldn't move. The crown glowed like molten iron. Brylin ordered Cassian, Winnow us. The Death Lord pointed a long-fingered hand at Brylin and Cassian, flicked his fingers once. and the world vanished, spinning into blackness and wind. Nesta's shield had become a millstone. Her sword, slick with blood, hung from her hand, a leaden, slippery weight. Every inch of her body burned, with exhaustion, with her wounds, with the knowledge that behind that line she'd drawn in the dirt. Through the archway at her back, Gwyn and Emery were still breathing, still climbing that final piece of the breaking to the summit. So she'd killed the Illyrian males who squeezed through those jagged rocks, who believed they'd find an untrained, helpless female and found death waiting for them before the archway. Only one remained. Some inner part of her quaked at the unseeing, battered faces, the blood running from the corpses. Valkyrie, she whispered to herself, you are a Valkyrie, and once again you are holding the pass. If you fall, it will be to save the friends who saved you, even when they didn't know they were doing so. A glance over her shoulder showed Emery still scaling the last of the summit, so slow, but so close. Dawn neared, but they could make it, win this thing. Nesta again faced the archway, knew who she'd find. Bellius leaned against a boulder, sword in hand, shield dangling from the other. Impressive work for a high Feyre. The male pushed off the rock of the archway, not sparing a glance at the warriors he'd let die for him. You know, our god, the first of the Illyrians, held the ground against enemy hordes right where you're standing. There wasn't a scratch on him, no sign of exhaustion despite the climb. Bellius smirked. He drew a line in the dirt as well. He nodded toward it. Nice little touch. Nesta hadn't known that tidbit of their history, but she revealed nothing. She became blood and dirt and pure determination. It didn't end well for Enalius, Bellius went on. He died after defending this spot for 3 days, climbed with his guts hanging out to the sacred stone at the top and died there. That's why we do this stupid thing, to honor him. She still didn't speak, but Bellius's eyes drifted to the peak above. Displeasure narrowed them. My crippled cunt of a cousin. And that half-breed disgrace this sacred place. A flutter of light from the summit washed over Bellius's features. Nesta's lips curled, widened into a smile at Bellius's growl. Gwyn and Emery had touched the sacred stone and been winnowed away by its magic. Seems like you didn't win, Nesta said to Bellius at last. Hatred darkened Bellius's glassy eyes. As if in answer, snow began falling, great clouds twining around the mountain. Rumbling, the snow clung to the rocks this time. I never wanted to win. Bellius's mouth twitched upward. I just wanted this. He launched at her. Chapter 72. Emery and Gwyn had won. They'd made it through the breaking. It was enough. Nesta only had to hold this asshole off for a few more minutes, until dawn. Then it'd be over. Her power would return and she could... Nesta didn't know what she'd do, but at least she'd have that weapon. Bellius lunged, swifter and surer than the others. Nesta barely had time to lift her shield. The impact shook her to her bones, but he was already pivoting, his own shield swinging for her face. She twirled out of range. Gods, she was tired. So tired, and he didn't stop. Didn't give her a moment's reprieve as he attacked, parrying and thrusting, driving her back toward the line, the archway, hatred burning in his face. Such blind, driving hatred, without reason, without end. The snow thickened, the wind howling, and the sky rumbled. Bellius struck again, and Nesta lifted her shield, meeting the blow. Lightning flashed, thunder booming in its wake. A storm had swept around the mountain, veiling the moon, the stars. Only the lightning arcing across the sky provided illumination to Belias's onslaught. She was on the defensive, and if she wanted to survive this, she had to find some way to change that. But the snow slickened the stones, the dirt, and as lightning lashed across the sky again, blinding them both, he thought faster, acted faster, used her blink to slam his shield into her own, knocking it from her grip. It clattered onto a stone nearby. Her fool's look toward it had him knocking the sword from her hand, too. Disarmed like a novice. Thunder cracked again, and Belias laughed. Disappointing. He paused, surveying her, and smiled before he attacked once more. Nesta dodged assault after assault, but not fast enough to avoid the precise slices Belias landed to her arms, her legs, her face. She slowed, her feet sliding on the slippery mountainside as the thunder snow raged. Another blow and her feet left the ground. The breath slammed out of her as her spine hit something unyielding, a boulder. Nesta's body refused to move as she panted. Warm blood trickled out of her nose. Belias approached, tossing his weapons aside. Doing this with my bare hands will be so much more satisfying. Move. The word rang through Nesta. She had to keep moving. On shaking hands, as lightning cracked and the snow swirled, Nesta pushed up off the rock. Her legs trembled, begging her to sit, to stop, to just fucking die already. Belias advanced, his powerful body sinking into a fighting position. The wild hatred in his gaze seared her. Her friends had made it, but she did not want to die. She wanted to live and live well and live happily. Wanted to do it with... Nesta braced her feet apart, settled her aching, battered body. Belias snorted. You really think you can beat me in hand-to-hand combat? Blood flowed from her mouth, her nose, but Nesta smiled anyway, its tang coating her tongue. I do. Belias threw his first punch, putting the entire force of his powerful body into it. Nesta blocked it, driving her fist into his nose. Bone crunched. Belias howled, falling back a step. And Nesta hissed, because my mate taught me well. Chapter 73. Mate. The word was a shooting star through Nesta as she and Belias launched at each other, punching, kicking, dodging, as if voicing the word had given her this final surge of strength. Belias slammed his fist into Nesta's jaw, so hard she rocked back a few steps. She ducked his next move, landing a blow on his ribs, but he kept hurting her toward the archway, the line, wearing her down, outlasting her. She'd keep going. Until the end, she'd fight him. Belias's fist connected with her left cheek. Pain cracked through her. Nesta's feet went out from under her. She flew backward, and time slowed. She landed on the other side of the line in the earth and could have sworn the mountain shuddered. Nesta crawled. She didn't care how pathetic it made her appear. She crawled away from Belias, through the arch, destroying the line she'd drawn. He advanced, bloodied and sneering. I'm going to enjoy this. She claimed it would be fine to die for her friends, that it was fine because they had made it, they had won, but to be killed by this nobody. Nesta snarled. She had nothing left. Her body had given up on her, like so many others had. Belias drew a knife from his boot. I think I'd rather slit your throat. She was alone. She had been born alone and would die alone, and this awful male would be the one to kill her. Thunder cracked, and the entire mountain shook with its impact. Belias took one step toward her, knife lifting. Blood sprayed. At first, she thought it was lightning that flashed across his throat, opening it so wide that his blood showered the snowy air. But then she saw the wings, the other set of wings. And when Bellius slumped to the earth, choking on his lifeblood, revealing Cassian standing there, teeth bared, blade in hand, she wondered if the thunder rocking the mountain had been his rage. Cassian stepped over Bellius's dying body and offered her a hand, not to sweep her into his arms, but to help her rise, as he had always done. Nesta gripped his hand and stood, her body bleeding in protest. But she forgot her pain, the death around them, as he folded her into his chest and held her tightly, whispering tenderly into her bloody hair, "And now I'm going to slit your pretty little throat." Cassian's words were not his own. His hands were not his own as Nesta, as his mate, tried to pull away, and he clamped his arms around her, hard enough that her bones shifted against his hands. He was screaming, silently, endlessly, screaming at her to fight him, to run, screaming at himself to stop it. But he couldn't. No matter what he did, he could not stop it. "Cassian," Nesta said, struggling. "Kill me," he silently begged her. "Kill me before I have to do this." "Cassian," Nesta shoved against his chest, but his arms held firm, squeezed her tighter. "He can't obey you, Nesta Archeron," rasped an old, withered voice from behind Nesta. "He's mine now." Cassian could not even widen his eyes in warning. His arms loosened on the Queen's silent command, allowing Nesta to turn in his embrace, presenting her to Brylin, who wore the crown atop her thin, white hair. Chapter 74. Satisfaction flashed in Brylin's dark eyes, and the 3 simple spikes of the golden crown glowed as she lifted a hand. The storm halted, cleared away to reveal the pale gray sky before dawn, the last of the stars winking out. Even nature could be influenced by the crown. Horror coiled through Nesta as Cassian's arms slackened. She launched herself a few steps away, whirling, but knew what she'd find. Cassian stood still as a statue, as if he'd been turned to stone. His eyes, normally so bright and alive, had become glassy, empty. Brylin had willed him that way, had moved people around like chess pieces to ensure that Nesta arrived here. "Why?" Nesta said. Brylin's thick fur cloak ruffled in the mountain wind. "Your power is too strong. Throwing you into this primitive spectacle wore you down. You had the Illyrians bring me here? My intent was to grab the maimed one." Nesta's blood boiled at the mention of Emery. "Bellius fed me the information about your friendship, and I saw how much she meant to you when we were linked through the harp and the crown. I knew that if I captured her, brought her here, you'd follow law or no law. You're reckless and conceited enough to think you could save her. But you made it easy for me. You went right to her house in Windhaven. Spared me the trouble of luring you. I let those witless Illyrians take her and the half-breed as an amusing bonus." Nesta didn't dare look up at Cassian. "All to wear me down?" "Yes, and without your magic." Nesta cut in, demanding, "I was worn down days ago. Why hold off until now?" Brylin glowered at the interruption. "I was waiting for him." She nodded toward Cassian, who was bristling with rage, something like loathing and fear now pushing through the cloudiness in his eyes. "Days and days. I waited for him to get close enough for me to use the crown to ensnare him. I had to use that brash princeling Eris to draw him in." A soft laugh. "Eris tried to help his soldiers when they surrounded him during his hunt. Help those wretches. He rode right up to them, rather than gallop away as any wise person would. They grabbed him with minimal fuss. Even those infernal hounds of his could do nothing as Cassian winnowed him away. Was Eris dead, or now her slave?" Cassian's face revealed nothing, but Brylin smiled at him. I was getting worried you'd never approach. Poor Eris would have met a very sorry end if that had been the case. His fire wouldn't have withstood Cassian's lake, I don't think. She glanced toward Bellius's corpse. He's a hateful brute, just like you, Cassian, arrogant and brash. He wandered off from his scouting unit to look for fun in my lands. So I showed him my idea of fun. Her thin lips twisted in a mockery of a smile. Brylin chuckled. I told him to hunt you down, not kill you, but it seems I wasn't precise enough in my wording, and it's rather satisfying to watch someone kill, especially with tools you've provided for them. I knew the rite would be so much more entertaining with weapons. I suppose I could have ordered Bellius to stand down, but I was rather enjoying the sight. Nesta demanded, "Why are you doing this? Why don't you want peace?" "Peace?" Brylin laughed. "What peace can I have now?" She waved a hand down at herself. "What I want is retribution. What I want is power. What I want is the trove. So I made sure you knew it too. Made sure you became my unwitting partner in collecting the items of power from this God's forsaken territory. And I know there's only one way you'll yield them to me. One person for whom you'd do so." A smile toward Cassian. "Your mate. I don't have the trove here. You can summon it. The objects will answer to you, no matter the wards on them. And you will hand them over to me. And then you'll kill us both? And then I shall make myself young again. I shall leave you both untouched." Nesta scented the lie. Cassian grunted out, "Don't." Brylin shot him a surprised look, and his mouth shut. He trembled, but remained standing still. Yet the glassiness in his gaze had cleared. "So," Brylin said, "you will trade me the trove for your mate's life. You are so thoroughly Fey now, Nesta Archeron. You would allow the world to turn to ash and ruin before you let your mate die." She frowned with distaste at the bodies around them. "The blood. Summon the trove, and let us be done with this messy business." Nesta couldn't stop her shaking. To give Brylin the trove, if she could even summon it. "No." "Then I shall have to try to convince you." Brylin snapped her fingers at Cassian, and Nesta had half a second to turn before he was upon her. Panic and rage shone in his eyes, but Nesta could do nothing, absolutely nothing, as he barreled into her, knocking her to the ground, pinning her there, an arm at her throat. The weight of him, once so intimate and loving, now the thing that would hold her here, hurt her. Pleading filled his face, utter anguish, as he fought the crown, fought it and lost. "It will destroy him, of course, to kill his own mate," Brylin said. "You will be dead, and you will die knowing you doom him to a life of misery." Cassian's free arm shook as he pulled the knife he'd killed Bellius with from his belt, brought it toward her. "You kill me," Nesta gasped, "and you don't get the trove. You'll never find it. There are others in your court as delusional as you are. They'll get it for me one way or another with the right incentive. Granted, I'll need your blood to unlock the wards on the trove. I saw that too, when you so foolishly held the harp in the prison. But I suppose killing you will provide plenty of the blood required." Brylin nodded to Cassian. "Get her up." Nesta didn't fight as he hauled her to her feet, held the knife against her throat. Pleading shone in his eyes, pleading and fear and love. Love she did not deserve, had never once deserved, but there it was, just as it had been there from the instant they'd met. What was the value of the world compared to him? To this? "This is growing tiring," Brylin said. Nesta let her mate see the love shining in her face. the sky filled with soft, gentle light. "Kill," Brylin ordered Cassian. Nesta had loved Cassian since she'd first laid eyes on him, had loved him even when she did not want to, even when she had been swallowed by despair and fear and hatred, had loved him and destroyed herself because she didn't believe she deserved him, because he was all that was good and brave and kind, and she loved him, she loved him, she loved him. Cassian's arm shook, and Nesta braced herself for the blow, showing him her forgiveness, her unending, unbreakable love for him. But Cassian roared. And then the knife twisted in his hand, angling not toward her, but toward his own heart, of his own free will. Against the crown's hold, against a gasping Brylin, he chose to drive the knife into his own heart. Kill, she had said, but had not specified who. And as the sun broke over the horizon, as Cassian's knife plunged for his chest, Nesta erupted with the force of the cauldron. There was nothing in Nesta's head but screaming, nothing in her heart but love and hatred and fury as she let go of everything inside her and the entire world exploded. The baying of her magic was a beast with no name. Avalanches cascaded down the cliffs in seas of glittering white. Trees bent and ruptured in the wake of the power that shattered from her. Distant seas drew back from their shores, then raced in waves toward them again. Glasses shook and shattered in Valaris. Books tumbled off the shelves in Helion's 1,000 libraries, and the remnants of a rundown cottage in the human lands crumbled into a pile of rubble. But all Nesta saw was Brylin. All she saw was the slack-jawed crone as Nesta leaped upon her, throwing her frail body to the rocky ground. All she knew was screaming as she clutched Brylin's face, the crown glowing blindingly white, and roared her fury to the mountains, to the stars, to the dark places between them. Gnarled hands turned young. A lined face became beautiful and lovely. White hair darkened to raven black. But Nesta bellowed and bellowed, letting her magic rage, unleashing every ember, erasing the queen beneath her from existence. The young hands turned to ash. The pretty face dissolved into nothing. The dark hair withered into dust, until all that was left of the queen was the crown on the ground. Chapter 75. Cassian lay face down on the earth. Nesta rushed toward him, praying, sobbing, her magic still echoing through the world. She turned him over, searching for the knife, the wound, but the knife lay beneath him, unbloodied. He groaned, cracking his eyes open. "I figured," he rasped. "I should lie low while you did that." Nesta gaped at him, then burst into tears. Cassian sat up, soothing sounds on his tongue, and took her face in his hands. "You unmade her." Nesta glanced to the crown on the earth, the black stain where Brylin had been. She had it coming. He chuckled, leaning his brow against hers. Nesta closed her eyes, breathing in his scent. "You are my mate, Cassian," she said against his lips, and kissed him softly. "And you're mine," he said, kissing her in turn. And then his hands slid into her hair, and the kiss. It did not matter, the world around them, or the crown at her feet, as he kissed her. A mate's kiss, one that set their souls twining, glowing. She pulled back, letting him see the joy in her eyes, her smile. His awe, his own joy, made her throat tighten. "Cassian, I..." But two figures landed beside them, making the mountain shudder, and they whirled to find Mor and Azriel there, faces grave. "Eris," Cassian demanded. "Safe, and the maid dagger is in our possession again," Azriel said. "Though Eris is pissed and confused, he's at the hewn city, but..." "It's fair," Moore said. Chapter 76. The river house was so silent, like a tomb. She started bleeding a few hours ago, Moore said as she led them through the house. But she's months away from giving birth, Nesta protested, following close on her heels. The scent of blood filled the room they entered. So much blood, all over the bed, smeared over Feyre's spread thighs. No babe, and Feyre's face, it was white as death. Her eyes were closed, her breathing too shallow. Rhys crouched at her side, gripping her hand. Panic and terror and pain warred on his face. Maja, kneeling on the bed between Feyre's legs, blood up to her elbows, said without looking at them, "I turned the babe, but he's not descending. He's wedged in the birth canal." A small intake of breath from the corner of the room revealed Amren sitting there, her pale face drained of color. "She's losing too much blood, and I can feel the babe's heart in distress," Maja announced. "What do we do?" Moore asked as Cassian and Azriel went to stand behind Rhys, hands on his shoulders. "There is nothing we can do," Maja said. "Cutting the babe out of her will kill her." "Cutting it out?" Nesta demanded, earning a sharp glare from Rhys. Maja ignored her tone. An incision along her abdomen, even one carefully made, is an enormous risk. It's never been successful, and even with Feyre's healing abilities, the blood loss has weakened her. "Do it," Feyre managed to say, the words weighted with pain. "Feyre," Rhys objected. "The babe likely won't survive," Maja said, voice gentle but no-nonsense. "It's too small yet. We risk both of you." "All of you," Cassian breathed, eyes on Rhys. "Do it," Feyre said, and her voice was that of the High Lady. No fear, only determination for the life of the babe within her. Feyre looked up at Rhys. "We have to." The High Lord nodded slowly, eyes lined with silver. A hand slid into Nesta's, and she found Elain there, shaking and wide-eyed. Nesta squeezed her sister's fingers. Together, they approached the other side of the bed. And when Elain began praying to the Fae's foreign gods, to their mother, Nesta bowed her head, too. Feyre was dying. The babe was dying. And Rhys would die with them. But Cassian knew it wasn't fear of his own death that had his brother trembling. Cassian's hand tightened on Rhys's shoulder. Night-flecked power leaked from his High Lord, trying to heal Feyre, just as Maja's was, but the blood kept pouring out, faster than any power could stifle. How had it come to this? A bargain made through love between two mates would now end in 3 lives lost. Cassian's body drifted somewhere far away as Maja got off the bed, then returned with a set of knives and tools, blankets and towels. "Go into her mind to take the pain away," Maja said to Rhys, who blinked in confirmation, then cursed, as if scolding himself for not thinking of it sooner. Cassian looked across the bed, to where Elain was holding Feyre's other hand, and Nesta held Ellen's. Rhys said to his mate, "Feyre, darling." "No goodbyes," Feyre panted. "No goodbyes, Rhys." Whatever Rhys did for the pain had her eyes closing, and Cassian's mind went wholly silent and blank as Maja pulled up Feyre's shift, her knives flashing. There was no sound when the tiny, winged babe emerged. When Moore stood there, blankets in hand, and took the unmoving boy from Maja's bloody hands. But Rhys was crying, and tears began pouring down Moore's face as she gazed at the silent babe in her arms. And then Maja swore, and Rhys began screaming. Cassian knew, as Rhys lunged for Feyre on the bed, what was about to happen. Yet no force in the world could stop it. The world slowed, went cold. There was the silent, too small babe in Mor's arms. There was Feyre, sliced open and bleeding out on the bed. There was Rhys and screaming, as if his soul were being shredded. But Cassian and Azriel were there, hauling him away from the bed as Maja tried to save Feyre. But death hovered nearby. Nesta felt it, saw it, a shadow thicker and more permanent than any of Azriel's. Elain sobbed, squeezing Feyre's hand, pleading with her to hold on, and Nesta stood in the midst of it, death swirling around her. And there was nothing to be done as Feyre's breathing thinned, as Maja began shouting at her to fight it. Feyre, who had gone into the woods for them, who had saved them so many times. Feyre, her sister. Death lurked near Feyre and her mate, a beast waiting to pounce, to devour them both. Nesta pulled her hand free of Elain's, stepped back. She closed her eyes and opened that place in her soul that had torn free on Ramiel. Cassian could barely restrain Rhys, even with all 7 siphons blaring along with Azriel's. He should let Rhys go to her. If they were both about to die, he should let Rhys go to his mate. Be with her in these last seconds, last breaths. Golden light flickered on the other side of the room, and Amren gasped. Cassian's heart curdled in horror. Nesta no longer hovered by the side of the bed. She now stood a few feet away. She wore the mask. She'd placed the crown atop her head, and she cradled the harp in her arms. No one had ever wielded all 3 and lived. No one could contain their power, control them. Nesta's eyes blazed with silver fire behind the mask, and Cassian knew the being that looked out was neither Fae nor human nor anything that walked the lands of this world. She began moving toward the bed, and Rhys surged for her. Nesta held up a hand, and Rhys went still as Cassian had gone under the crown's control. Feyre's chest lifted, a death rattle whispering from her white lips, and Cassian could do nothing but watch as Nesta's fingers, still bloody and filthy from the right, drifted to the final string of the harp, the 26th string, and plucked it. Chapter 77. It was time. The 26th string on the harp was time itself, and Nesta stopped it as Feyre took her last breath. Lanthes had said as much, that even death bowed to the final string. That time was of no consequence to the harp. The string made no sound as Nesta plucked it, only robbed the world of it. And the death that Nesta felt around her sister, around Rhys, and around the babe in Mor's arms. She bade the mask to halt that too. Hold it at bay. In the beginning, and in the end, there was darkness, and nothing more. A soft, familiar voice whispered the words, as they had been whispered to her long ago, as it had warned her in Orid's darkness. A lovely, kind female voice, sage and warm, which had been waiting for her all this time. The room was a tableau of frozen movement, of shocked and horrified faces twisted toward her, toward Feyre and all that blood. Nesta walked through it, past Rhys's screaming, straining body, his face the portrait of despair and terror and pain, past grave-faced Azriel, past Cassian, gritting his teeth as he held Rhys back, past Amren, whose gray eyes were fixed on where Nesta had been, pure dread and something like awe in her face, past Mor and that too small bundle in her arms, Elain at her side, frozen in her crying. Nesta walked through it all, through time, to her sister. Do you see how it might be? That soft female voice whispered, staring out through her eyes. What you might do. I feel nothing, Nesta said silently. Only the sight of Feyre on death's threshold kept her from forgetting why she was here, what she needed to do. Is that not what you wanted? To feel nothing? I thought that was what I wanted. Nesta surveyed the people around her. Her sisters, Cassian, who had been willing to plunge a dagger into his heart rather than harm her. But no longer. When the female voice didn't press her, Nesta went on, I want to feel everything. I want to embrace it with my whole heart. Even the things that hurt and hunt you? Only curiosity laced the question. Nesta allowed herself a breath to ponder it, stilling her mind once more. We need those things in order to appreciate the good. Some days might be more difficult than others, but I want to experience all of it, live through all of it. With them, that wise, soft voice whispered, so live, Nesta Archeron. Nesta needed nothing more as she took her sister's limp hand and knelt upon the floor, set down the harp beside her, its silent note still reverberating, holding time firm in its grasp. She didn't know what she could offer beyond this. Stroking Feyre's cold hand, Nesta spoke into the timeless, frozen room. You loved me when no one else would. You never stopped. Even when I didn't deserve it, you loved me and fought for me and... Nesta looked at Feyre's face, death a breath away from claiming it. She didn't stop the tears that ran down her cheeks as she squeezed Feyre's slender hand tighter. I love you, Feyre. She had never said the words aloud, to anyone. I love you, Nesta whispered again. I love you. And when the harp's final string wavered, like a whisper of thunder on the air, Nesta covered Feyre's body with her own. Time would resume soon. She did not have much longer. She reached inward, toward the power that had made deathless monsters tremble and wicked kings fall to their knees. But she didn't know how to use it. Death flowed through her veins, yet she did not have the knowledge to master it. One wrong move, one mistake, and Feyre would be lost. So Nesta held her sister tightly, with time halted around them, and she whispered, If you show me how to save her, you can have it back. The world paused. Worlds beyond their own paused. Nesta buried her face in the cold sweat of Feyre's neck. She opened that place within herself and said to the mother to the cauldron, I'll give back what I took from you. Just show me how to save them, her and Rhys and the baby. Rhys and her brother. That's what he was, wasn't he? Her brother, who had offered her kindness even when she knew he wanted to throttle her. And she him, and the baby, her nephew, blood of her blood. She would save him, save them, even if it took everything. Show me, she pleaded. No one answered. The harp stopped its echoing. As time resumed, noise and movement roaring into the room, Nesta whispered to the cauldron, her promise rising above the din. I'll give it all back. And a soft, invisible hand brushed her cheek in answer. Cassian blinked, and Nesta had gone from one side of the room to the bed, had plucked the harp, and now lay half atop Feyre, whispering. No silver fire burned in her eyes, not a cold ember, no sign of the being who'd peered out through her stare, either. Rhys lunged against his hold, but Amren stepped to their side and hissed, Listen, Nesta whispered. I give it all back. Her shoulders heaved as she wept. Rhys began shaking his head, his power a palpable, rising wave that could destroy them all, destroy the world if it meant Feyre was no longer in it, even if he only had seconds to live beyond her. But Amren grabbed the nape of his neck. Her red nails dug into his golden skin. Look at the light. Iridescent light began flowing from Nesta's body into Feyre. Nesta kept holding her sister. I give it back. I give it back. I give it back. Even Rhys stopped fighting. No one moved. The light glimmered down Feyre's arms, her legs, suffused her ashen face, began to fill the room. Cassian's siphons guttered, as if sensing a power far beyond his own, beyond any of theirs. Tendrils of light drifted between the sisters, and one, delicate and loving, floated toward Moore, to the bundle in her arms, setting the silent babe within glowing bright as the sun. And Nesta kept whispering, "I give it back. I give it all back." The iridescence filled her, filled Feyre, filled the bundle in Moore's arms, lighting his friend's face so the shock on it was etched in stark relief. "I give it back," Nesta said, one more time, and mask and crown tumbled from her head. The light exploded, blinding and warm, a wind sweeping past them, as if gathering every shard of itself out of the room. And as it faded, dark ink splashed upon Nesta's back, visible through her half-shredded shirt, as if it were a wave crashing upon the shore. A bargain, with the cauldron itself. Yet Cassian could have sworn a luminescent, gentle hand prevented the light from leaving her body altogether. Cassian didn't fight Rhys this time as he raced to the bed, to where Feyre lay, flush with color. No more blood spilling between her legs. Feyre opened her eyes. She blinked at Rhys and then turned to Nesta. "I love you, too," Feyre whispered to her sister and smiled. Nesta didn't stop her sob as she launched herself onto Feyre and embraced her. But the gesture was short-lived, hardly the length of a blink before a healthy wail went up from the other side of the room, and Moore stammered, weeping, and the babe she brought to the bed was not the small, still thing she'd been holding, but a full-term winged boy. His thick cap of dark hair lay plastered to his head as he mewled for his mother. Feyre began sobbing then, too, taking her son from Moore, hardly noticing Maja suddenly leaning between her legs, inspecting what was there, the healing. "If I didn't know better, I'd say you developed an Illyrian's anatomy," the healer muttered, but no one was listening. Not as Rhys put his arm around Feyre and together they peered at the boy, their son. Together, they wept and laughed, and when Maja said, "Let him feed," Feyre obeyed, wonder in her eyes as she brought him to her breast, now swollen with milk. But Rhys watched in awe for all of a moment before he whirled to Nesta, who had slid off the bed and now stood beside the mask. Behind her, the crown and the harp lay strewn on the floor. Cassian held his breath as the two of them surveyed each other. Then Rhys fell to his knees and took Nesta's hands in his, pressing his mouth to her fingers. "Thank you," he wept, head bowed. Cassian knew it wasn't in gratitude for Rhys's own life that he knelt upon the sacred tattoos inked upon his knees. Nesta dropped to the carpet, lifted Rhys's face in her hands, studied what lay in it. Then she threw her arms around the High Lord of the Night Court and held him tightly. Chapter 78. Gwyn and Emery were waiting in one of the parlors overlooking the river, healed but still in their torn, bloody clothes. Steam curled off the cups set on the low table before them. Emery said thickly as Nesta stopped before their couch, "Two wraiths brought us some tea." But Gwyn cut her off, face blazing as she hissed at Nesta, "I should never forgive you." Nesta just leaped onto the couch, hugging Gwyn tightly. She reached out an arm for Emery, who joined their embrace. "We can talk forgiveness another day," Nesta said through her tears, settling between them. "You won the entire damn thing." "Thanks to you," Emery said. "I got a crown of my own, don't worry," Nesta said, even as she knew Moore was now winnowing all three objects of the trove back to the place Nesta had taken them from. She'd summoned them, working around Helian's spells. No spell could ever keep them from her. Brylin had spoken true about that. "Who healed you?" Nesta pulled back to survey them. "How are you even here?" "The stone," Emery explained, features soft with wonder. It healed every wound on us the moment it brought us out of the rite. We arrived here of all places. I think it knew where we were needed most, Gwyn said quietly, and Nesta smiled. Her smile faded, however, as she asked Emery, "Will your family punish you for what happened to Bellius? If they so much as thought about doing so, Nesta would pay them a little visit, with the mask, the harp, and the crown, which was why the trove should be kept far away from her." Emery shrugged a shoulder. Deaths happen in the rite. He fell in combat when one of his fellow warriors turned on him during the hike up Ramiel's slopes. That's as much as they need to know. Her eyes twinkled. Nesta had a feeling that the truth of what had occurred on that mountain would remain only with them, and the innermost circle of Feyre's court. Cassian had clearly been brought into the rite against his will. Hopefully no one would ever challenge that fact. Gwyn laughed hoarsely. "The Illyrians are going to be furious about our winning, you know? Especially because I have no intention of being called Corinthian. I'm content with being a Valkyrie." "Oh, they'll be in hysterics for decades," Emery agreed, grinning. Nesta grinned back, slinging her arms around her friends again and sinking into the deep cushions of the couch. "I can't wait to see it." And for the first time, with these two friends beside her, with her mate waiting for her, it was true. Nesta couldn't wait to see the future that unfolded. All of it. The baby, whom Rhys and Feyre named Nyx, was as beautiful as anyone could ever dream a baby to be. Dark hair, with blue eyes that already glowed with his father's and mother's starlight, offsetting the light tan of his skin. And then there were the tiny wings, which Cassian had never realized were so delicate, so perfect, until he touched their velvet softness. The claws atop them would grow in much later, along with the ability to use the wings themselves. But he stared at the bundle in his arms, his heart full to bursting, and said to where Feyre and Rhys sat on the bed, neatly remade with clean linens, "You have no idea how much trouble this one is going to get into." Feyre chuckled. "Those pretty eyes will be to blame, I'm sure." Rhys, still rattled and pale, just smiled. The door opened, and then Nesta was there, still in her torn, bloody, stolen clothes. She'd held the babe already, and Cassian's chest had swelled, aching, to see her smiling down at Nyx. But now Nesta's eyes drifted to Cassian, and he saw the quiet request in them. He silently handed Nyx to Osriel, who winced at the transfer of this most delicate little creature to his scarred hands, and followed Nesta out the door, into the hall, and down the stairs. They didn't speak until they stood on the back lawn of the house, overlooking the river once again awakening in the spring sunshine. What she'd done, both during the rite and after it, she'd filled them all in briefly. He knew there was more, but perhaps some things would always remain a secret between her and her friends, her sisters in arms. So Cassian asked, "Is your magic, the powers, really gone?" The brisk spring wind whipped her golden brown hair across her face. "I gave it back to the cauldron in exchange for the knowledge of how to save them." She swallowed. "But a little remains. I think someone else stopped the cauldron from taking. All of it. And I made some changes of my own." The mother, the only being who would see the sacrifice Nesta had made and give a little back. Perhaps it was she who had peered out at them through the mask. "What did you change?" Nesta rested a hand on her abdomen. "I changed myself a little too, so none of us will have to go through this again." For a heartbeat, Cassian had no words. You're ready for a baby?" Nesta barked a laugh. "No, gods no. I'll be drinking my contraceptive tea for a while yet." She laughed again. "But I adjusted myself to match what the cauldron did for Feyre, for when the time is right." He couldn't tear himself from the quiet joy lighting her face. so he offered her a soft smile. Yes, when the time was right, they would start that journey together. But what Nesta had done today, what she'd given, "You could have ruled the world with your power," he said carefully. "I don't want to rule the world." Her eyes were unguarded in a way he had never seen. "Mate," she had called him. "What do you want?" Cassian managed to ask, voice rasping. She smiled, and damn if it wasn't the loveliest thing he'd ever seen. You've had me from the moment you met me." She tucked a strand of hair behind an arched ear. "I know." He brushed a kiss over her mouth, but Nesta said, "I want a disgustingly ornate mating ceremony." He laughed, pulling away. "Really? Why not?" "Because I'll never hear the end of it from Azriel and more, or the Illyrians." Nesta considered, then pulled something out of her pocket. A small biscuit, swiped from a tray in the birthing room. "Then here, food. From me to you, my mate. That's the official ritual, isn't it? The sharing of food from one mate to the other." He choked. "These are my two options? A frilly mating ceremony or a stale biscuit?" Her face filled with such true light, it nearly stole the breath from him. "Yes." So Cassian laughed again and folded her fingers around the pathetic biscuit, leaning to whisper in her ear, "We'll make a coronation of it, Ness." "I already have a crown," she said. "I just want you." His jaw tightened. Yes, they'd have to figure out what to do with the entire dread trove now that they possessed all three objects. How Nesta had summoned it despite the spells Elain had placed on the other two. He'd think of that another day, along with the fact that she'd stopped time with the harp, and that she seemed to have some sort of connection or understanding with the mother. The mother. But Nesta smoothed his bunched brow, as if she could see those worries there. "Later," she promised. "We'll deal with all that later, including the remaining queens, Cassian, and a still looming war." "Later," he agreed, and she slid her arms around his neck. There were no more words after that, only the two of them, standing on the riverbank under the sun, letting its warmth seep through their bones. Nesta pulled away, whispering, "I love you," and it was all Cassian needed before kissing her again, the force of it more powerful and enduring than the cauldron itself. Chapter 79. Meeting Eris was the last thing Cassian wanted to do, but someone had to check in with the mail. 2 days after Nyx's birth, Cassian set off to do just that. Eris had been seen to a suite in the hewn city, and from Kyr's stormy expression upon Cassian's arrival, he had a feeling that Eris had told the steward very little. Eris was reading a book by the roaring fire, an ankle crossed over a knee, as if his presence here were nothing unusual, as if he hadn't been kidnapped, enchanted, and manipulated by a vengeful queen and a death lord. Eris lifted his amber eyes as Cassian shut the door. "I can't stay long." "Good." Eris closed the book, watching Cassian drop into the seat opposite him. "I suppose you want to know what I told Brylin. Rhys already looked into your mind. Turns out you didn't know much." He gave the male a slashing grin. Eris rolled his eyes. "So why am I here?" Cassian surveyed the male. Eris's clothes remained immaculate, but a muscle ticked on his jaw. "We wanted to know what you told Baron. Since you're sitting here in one piece, I'm assuming he doesn't know about our involvement in your rescue." "Oh, he knows that you assisted me." Cassian straightened, wings shifting. Eris went on, "Always mix truth and lies, General. Didn't those warrior brutes teach you about how to withstand an enemy's torture?" Cassian knew. He'd been tortured and interrogated and never once broken. "Baron tortured you?" Eris rose, tucking his book under an arm. Who cares what my father does to me? He believed my story about the Shadowsinger spies informing him that a valuable asset had been kidnapped by Brylin, and that you lot were disgusted to arrive and find it was me, rather than someone from the summer or winter courts or whoever stoops to associate with you. Cassian unpacked each word. Baron had tortured his own son for information, rather than thanking the mother for returning him. But Eris had held out, fed Baron another lie. And then there was the way Eris had spoken about the other courts. Something had been off in his words, his tight expression. Was the male jealous? Cassian opened his mouth, more than ready to launch that question at him and bestow a stinging blow. Yet he hesitated, looked into Eris's eyes. The male had been raised with every luxury and privilege on paper, but who knew what terrors Baron had inflicted upon him? Cassian knew Baron had murdered Lucien's lover. If the High Lord of Autumn had been willing to do that, what wouldn't he do? Get that pitying look off your face? Eris snarled softly. I know what sort of creature my father is. I don't need your sympathy. Cassian again studied him. Why did you leave Moor in the woods that day? It was the question that would always remain. Was it just to impress your father? Eris barked a laugh, harsh and empty. Why does it still matter to all of you so much? Because she's my sister, and I love her. I didn't realize Illyrians were in the habit of fucking their sisters. Cassian growled. It still matters, he ground out, because it doesn't add up. You know what a monster your father is and want to usurp him. You act against him in the best interests of not only the Autumn Court but also of all of the fairy lands. You risk your life to ally with us, and yet you left her in the woods. Is it guilt that motivates all of this? Because you left her to suffer and die. Golden flame simmered in Eris's gaze. I didn't realize I'd be facing another interrogation so soon. Give me a damn answer. Eris crossed his arms, then winced, as if whatever injuries lay beneath his immaculate clothes ached. You're not the person I want to explain myself to. I doubt Moor will want to listen. Maybe not. Eris shifted on his feet and grimaced again. But you and yours have more important things to think about than ancient history. My father is furious that his ally is dead, but he's not deterred. Cassian remains in play, and Baron might very well be stupid enough to establish an alliance with him, too. I hope that whatever Morrigan is doing in Valahin will counteract the damage my father will unleash. Cassian had heard enough. He wanted to return home, to the house, to Nesta, his fierce, beautiful mate, who had saved his High Lord and Lady and their son. He'd never stop being in awe of her, and all she had done, how far she'd come. And one day, when the time was right, they'd take the next steps. They'd walk down whatever road lay ahead of them together. So Cassian stalked for the door, for the life awaiting him in Valaris. Eris was still their ally, was willing to be tortured to keep their secrets, and Cassian didn't need to be a courtier to know his next words would slice deep. But it would be a necessary wound. Perhaps it would be enough to push things in the right direction. You know, Eris, he said, a hand wrapping around the doorknob. I think you might be a decent male, deep down, trapped in a terrible situation. He looked over his shoulder and found Eris's gaze blazing again. But only pity stirred in his chest. Pity for a male who had been born into riches, but had been destitute in every way that truly mattered. In every way that Cassian had been blessed, blessings that were now overflowing. So Cassian said, I grew up surrounded by monsters. I've spent my existence fighting them. And I see you, Eris. You're not one of them, not even close. I think you might even be a good male. Cassian opened the door, turning from Eris's curled lip. You're just too much of a coward to act like one. Chapter 80. Spring bloomed fully around Valaris, and Feyre and Nyx were finally well enough to leave the house each day, going on walks that often lasted hours thanks to the well-wishers who longed to see the child. Someone always accompanied them, usually Rhys or Mor, who was just as protective as the parents of the babe. Cassian and Azriel were hardly better. But none of the others were present on a warm day a few weeks later, when Nesta joined Feyre and Elain for a walk outside the city. Even a glance at the sky revealed no sign of Cassian, who had been keeping Nesta up until dawn with his lovemaking and had become utterly obnoxious about calling her mate any chance he got, except at their continuing morning training with the priestesses. Succeeding in the blood rite didn't mean the training stopped. No, after she and her friends told Cassian and Azriel most of the details of their ordeal, the two commanders had compiled a long list of mistakes that the three of them had made that needed to be corrected, and the others wanted to learn from them too. So they would keep training until they were all well and truly Valkyries. Gwyn, despite the rite, had returned to living in the library. Gwyn had said she might leave for Nesta and Cassian's mating ceremony in 3 days, which would take place in the small temple on the river house's grounds. Despite Nesta's wishes for an ornate ceremony, she hadn't wanted a giant crowd. The temple was already being bedecked with flowers of every variety, enchanted against wilting, as well as silks and lace and candles and garlands. All of it paid for by Rhys, who could not stop buying her presents. Dresses and jewels and throw pillows and all manner of nonsense had rained down on her until Nesta had to order him to stop, saying that an extravagant mating ceremony would make them even. So Rhys had ensured that the ceremony would be as outrageous as possible. Nesta had no doubt the temple would be covered in such riches it'd be laughable. But all that mattered, she realized, was the male who would be standing with her, first as they swore their vows, then as they offered each other food, and then as their friends and family bound their hands together with a length of black ribbon, to remain until the mating was consummated. Even though the consummating had been going on 2 or 3 times a day for weeks now. But it didn't matter. Nesta could hardly wait for it. The ceremony, the whatever awaited her beyond it, none of it frightened her. None of it left her with that pit of despair. Not with Cassian at her side, her friends at her back, the House of Wind, that had been Rhys's last present before the ceremony. It was theirs, hers. Since the house had decided it liked Nesta more than anyone else, Rhys had given it to her and Cassian, with the caveat that the library belonged to the priestesses and that the court still had use of the house for formal occasions. It was good enough for Nesta, better than good. She joined them at the river house one night to find a mating present from Feyre waiting for her, hanging on the wall in the grand entry. A portrait of Nesta holding the line at the pass of Enalius. She'd let Rhys see some parts of the rite, but had no idea he'd asked not out of curiosity, but to give his mate ideas for this. Nesta had stared and stared at her portrait, hung between one of Feyre and one of Elain, and hadn't realized she was crying until Feyre had held her tightly. A home. The House of Wind, Valaris, this court. They were her home. The thought kindled a kernel of light in her chest that had not extinguished, even in the days after the rite. That kernel was still flickering as Nesta faced that day's task, the task that was so long overdue. Feyre left the ornate black carriage at the base of the grassy hill, carrying Nyx as the 3 of them scaled its soft slope. The city spread before them, glowing in the spring sunshine, but Nesta's eyes remained on the lone stone atop the hill. Her heart thundered, and she kept a step back as Feyre knelt before the grave marker, showing Nyx to the stone. "Your grandson, father?" she whispered, voice thick, and then Feyre bowed her head, speaking too low for Nesta or Elain, standing at Nesta's side to hear. After a few minutes, Feyre rose, letting her tears run, as holding the babe kept her hands occupied. Elain went forward, whispered a few things to their father's grave, and then both sisters looked to Nesta, smiling tentatively. Feyre had asked this morning if Nesta wanted to come, to show their father the baby, and there had been no answer in Nesta's heart except one. So she nodded to her sisters to go on ahead, and they obeyed, easing back down the grassy hill as Nesta lingered by the gravestone. She searched for the words, for any explanation or apology, but none came. The sun was a warm hand on her shoulder, like the one that had prevented the last of her power from vanishing, as if telling her that the apology, the begging for forgiveness, it was no longer needed. Her father had died for her, with love in his heart, and though she might not have deserved it then, she would do all she could now to earn it, to deserve not just his love, but that of those around her. Of Cassian. Some days might indeed be difficult, but she'd do it, fight for it. Her father had died for her, with love in his heart, and Nesta held love in her own heart as she pulled the small, carved rose from her pocket and set it upon the gravestone, a permanent marker of the beauty and good he'd tried to bring into the world. Nesta brought her fingers to her lips, pressed a kiss to them, then laid her hand upon the gravestone. "Thank you," she said, blinking back the stinging in her eyes. "Thank you." A swift shadow passed overhead, followed by a whisper of wings, and Nesta didn't need to look to know who sailed high above, making sure all was safe, that she was safe. Busybody. But she blew Cassian a soft kiss, too. Her mate, her love, her friend, the light within her chest brightened to a radiant sun. She found Feyre and Elain waiting halfway down the hill, Nyx now dozing peacefully in Ellen's arms. Her sisters beamed, beckoning her to join. And Nesta smiled back, her steps light as she hurried down the hill to meet them. The end.